Margaret's Pave. My once bright and full house had grown unbearably hollow. No husband to share the silence with, Ethan too wrapped up in his shiny new mate, and Celeste gone off to live with Kieran. It was just me now, rattling around in rooms that used to be full of voices, left to make conversation with my own grief. So when Dr. Fairchild suggested I take daily short walks, get some fresh air for the soul, I agreed. I thought I would go to the park, perhaps, or stroll down the avenue where the cafes spilled into the street with clinking glasses and low laughter. Remind myself that although my world had stopped, the one around me moved on. Instead, I heard myself read off an address I'd inadvertently committed to memory, and I found myself staring up at a house I knew but had never sought out. Saraphina's home. I wasn't sure what possessed me to get out of the car. My oldest daughter had made it clear, over and over again, that she had no use for me in her life. But there I was, smoothing my blouse with trembling fingers, standing at the base of her front steps, staring at the modest little house that she'd made hers. It was my first time seeing it. I had always assumed she lived in something temporary, a quick escape after the suddenness of her divorce. But the ivy curling up the porch rail, the potted herbs on the windowsill, the faint scent of rosemary and earth, it was hers. I almost turned back. But then I thought of Dr. Fairchild's words, "Make peace with your life as it is now. Clear your mind." The heaviest burden on my mind was this, the yawning rift between me and Saraphina. Edward's words, spoken just weeks before he was so cruelly snatched from me, replaced Dr. Fairchild's in my mind. This family has been divided for too long. I believe it's time we bring Saraphina home. My knuckles rapped lightly against the door before I could talk myself out of it. There was a long pause, long enough that I began to think she wasn't home and I should leave before humiliation claimed me. But then the door cracked open and I drew in a breath. Saraphina stood there, eyes wide, lips parted in shock. Hair unpinned, mussed from sleep, wearing a loose sweater and shorts, she looked soft, unguarded, not the armored daughter who usually faced me. I almost mistook her for the little girl she had once been, the one who clung to my skirts and looked at me like I was her world. But then I noticed something else. The sweater slid off one shoulder, bearing a collarbone and a faint purple bruise. Her cheeks were flushed, partly with shock, but partly with... And then I saw him. The doorway had a direct view of the stairs, and Lucian Reed descended those stairs at that exact moment, barefoot, his shirt unbuttoned halfway. His eyes flicked to me, widening for a fraction before his face settled into an unreadable mask. My gaze darted between them, the way Sarah swallowed hard, the matching messy hair and disheveled clothing, the faint hickey. The picture painted itself. I lifted my chin, summoning steel into my spine. "I see I've interrupted." Sarah flushed, the color high in her cheeks. "Mother, what are you doing here?" I smiled thinly. "I was discharged a while ago. The doctor recommended a regular change of scenery." I thought. I shrugged. "Why not see where my daughter has made her home?" Sarah snorted. When I raised a brow, the amusement faded. "You're serious? Would I come all this way for a joke?" Her lips pressed into a tight line, and for a second I thought she was going to turn me around, send me out of her home like she was determined to send me out of her life. But then she moved aside reluctantly and sighed like she was accepting martyrdom. "Come in, then." I stepped into the foyer. Her home was smaller than what I was used to, of course, but not unpleasant. Wood floors polished with care, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains, books stacked in corners, photographs tucked into mismatched frames. A house that lived and breathed, evidently filled with love like ours had once upon a time. Still, I could not resist the words that slipped from my tongue. "This is very much your style, Saraphina. Not sophisticated, no, but cozy. Your father would have approved. He always preferred comfort over ostentation." Inside, my chest ached. The mere thought, let alone mention of her father, was like pressing on a bruise that refused to heal. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp as glass. "Sorry it's not up to your standards, Mother," she said tightly. "I know how much you value sophistication." "I meant no insult," I said, folding my hands. I caught sight of Lucian moving behind her, casual and easy like a wolf in its den. His presence filled the house, filled the air. When he brushed his hand against Sarah's arm in a fleeting, almost protective touch, I noticed. and I did not miss the way she leaned almost imperceptibly toward it. She'd made it clear in the hospital that she did not want me to meet him. But she was my daughter, and I had a right to know the kind of person she deigned to spend her time with. I seated myself on her sofa, smoothing my skirt. "Is there something I can help you with, Mother?" Sarah asked. She was still standing, as if she had no intention for this visit to last long, as if she couldn't wait to be rid of me. "I would love a cup of tea," I said. She scoffed. "I don't know what you think." "I'll make it," Lucian offered, placing a hand on Sarah's. Again, I noticed the way she instantly eased, leaning into him yet again. Interesting. She turned to him, and a brief moment flickered between them before she nodded and he exited the living room. Sarah exhaled and turned back in my direction. She perched on the armrest furthest away and fixed an expectant gaze on me. "That's not ladylike," I pointed out. She nodded. "Thanks for your observation." She didn't move. "You would never sit like that back in the Lockwood Manor." She spread her arms around, gesturing to the living room. "Well, thank gods I'm not in the Lockwood Manor." I swallowed. Do you ever think of coming back?" She snorted again. "It's way too early for jokes, Mother." "Let me reiterate, Sarah, I did not come here for jokes." "Could have fooled me," she mumbled. I sighed. "Perhaps next time I'll bring the old family albums. It might do you good to remember those years, remember where you came from." Her eyes flashed. "There's no need. I'm not a part of the Lockwood family tree anymore, remember?" "Just because you got married." "No," she cut in. "Not because I got married, because Father said, and I quote, 'From this day forward you are no daughter of mine.' Remember that, Mother?" She sneered. "You were right next to him when he said that. You have that in a photo album?" The words were strangled, her face twisted, and I saw the wound they'd carved in her 10 years ago, a wound that never healed. Still, she must not have intended for her words to cut so sharp. The Saraphina I knew would never knowingly hurt anyone's feelings. "Saraphina," I shook my head. "Do you truly believe you can erase bloodlines that easily?" "I'm not the one who tried to erase my bloodline." "Your room is still preserved at home," I continued, refusing to relive the moment my husband disowned our daughter. "Don't be stubborn," I chided. "You are still my daughter. I carried you for 10 months. I labored with you for 27 hours. I nearly bled out bringing you into this world. Do you think I would so easily abandon you?" Her lips trembled, not with gratitude or sentiment, but fury. "You already abandoned me, a long time ago." The words rang in the quiet, and before I could compose a reply, Lucian's voice sliced through the air. "I believe that's enough." I turned, startled. His eyes were hard, his jaw tight. "You talk of sacrifice, but what you're doing is manipulation. You cling to her not out of love, but out of control. You abandoned her when you chose appearances over her happiness. And now you come here, after everything, to claim motherhood when it suits you. How dare you?" My voice cracked with indignation. "You presume to lecture me about my own child?" "She's not a child," he replied evenly. "She's a woman, forged from the fire of your family's disdain and prejudice, and she deserves better than guilt disguised as affection." "Do not speak of what you don't know. I know enough." He cut in. "And you're delusional if you think there's any justification for all the ways you failed her." The silence burned. I looked at Saraphina, hoping for her to defend me, to scold him, to tell him he misunderstood. But she didn't. Her eyes softened only when they fell on him, the same way they hardened when they fell on me. The betrayal sank like a stone in my gut. My throat closed. "So this is how it is, Saraphina? You're just going to let him talk to your mother like that?" Lucian moved a step forward, but Sarah lifted her hand, stopping him. "That's enough, Lucian. Mother, you should go home." "Sarah, go. Home," she pressed, her voice taking on a steel edge that reminded me of Edward. "I don't want any more Lockwoods in my home, but I will call Ethan to get you if it comes to that." The finality in her tone left no room for argument. My daughter, the child I had raised, the baby I had held against my chest, was casting me out of her home. My pride would not let me beg. I stood, smoothing my blouse, forcing my voice steady. "Very well, I'll leave you to your life. But don't imagine for one moment, Saraphina, that blood can be undone by will alone." Her eyes glistened, though her chin stayed high. She said nothing. I left before my knees could give way. Seraphina's povee. After the door shut behind my mother, the silence in the house felt sharper, like the echo of everything unspoken still hanging in the air. My chest was tight, and for a moment I just stared at the spot where she'd sat, torn between guilt and relief. Lucian's voice broke the quiet, oddly hesitant. "Sarah, did I overstep?" I turned to him. His gaze was steady, searching my face for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I hated that he'd even asked, that he thought he might have done something wrong by defending me. I shook my head. "No, you didn't. I just—" My throat ached, the words dragging. "You don't need to waste your energy on her, on any of them. I don't want my family's mess to bleed into your life." The corner of his mouth tightened, not in anger, but in that way he had when he was restraining himself. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his steadiness pressing against my chaos. "Sarah," he said, low and unyielding, "the moment we chose each other, your battles became mine. Protecting you isn't a waste of energy. It's my responsibility, my choice, even if the attacks come from your own family." Something inside me trembled, half afraid to lean on those words, half aching to collapse into them. Margaret's Pov. The drive home passed by in a haze, but I hardly noticed the route. Each turn slipped by unnoticed, my mind caught somewhere else entirely. Finally, the Lockwood Manor loomed before me. Our home. Except it didn't feel like a home. It hadn't in months. Not since Edward's laughter no longer echoed through the halls. Not since Ethan buried himself in pack duties and found his comfort in the arms of his mate. Not since Celeste returned to our lives, just to move in with Kieran almost immediately. What remained was silence. The kind that pressed on the chest like a weight, the kind that made the clink of a spoon against porcelain sound deafening. I sat in the entryway for a long time, staring at Edward's coat still hanging on the rack. We'd been about to go out. He was halfway through tugging it on when the call of the attack came through. In his haste, he'd shrugged it off and tossed it aside. And there it had stayed for the past 3 months, untouched, as if waiting for him to come back and shrug into it. My throat burned, and I pressed a hand to it, forcing the tears back. I had already cried too much for too long. Still, the tears seemed endless, the sorrow eternal. But right now, what gnawed at me more than grief was confusion. I replayed the scene at Sarah's house in my mind again and again, trying to pinpoint where I had gone wrong. Yes, perhaps my motives had gone misunderstood. Sarah always did have a way of misconstruing my intentions. And yes, perhaps I had clung too hard. But what mother didn't? What mother, after giving life, could be expected to simply let her child turn cold to her? No matter how many years stretched out between us, no matter how hard she tried to pretend otherwise, I would always be Saraphina's mother. And even if I was wrong, what right did Lucian Reed have to interfere? He wasn't even her husband. His place was nowhere between us. It was still only late morning, but my outing had had the opposite effect of its purpose and exhausted me greatly. I collapsed into bed without changing. I curled up on my side, hugging Edward's pillow to me. I hadn't washed it in 3 months, but his scent was already fading, and I fell asleep like I always did, tears slipping down my cheeks. And then, rare as rain in drought, I dreamed of him. Edward stood before me as he once had, broad-shouldered, his hair touched with the faintest silver, eyes a beautiful cerulean blue that used to both steady and undo me. Eyes exactly like Sarah's. His arms opened, and I went into them, desperate, clutching at his shirt like a drowning woman clinging to a life vest. "Edward," I whispered, the name breaking into a sob. "Oh, Edward." "My love." His voice was warm, slightly gruff. Oh, how I'd missed his voice. "I can't do this anymore," I said, voice thick. "I don't understand them. I don't understand her. Everything I say, everything I do, it's wrong." I pulled back to look up at him. "Saraphina hates me, Edward. Our daughter hates me. And Ethan is so busy, and Celeste, I can't quite figure out. What am I supposed to do? I don't know how to do all this without you, Edward." His hand smoothed over my hair, his touch so achingly familiar I thought I might dissolve under it. He didn't speak for the longest time, only held me the way he always had when words failed him. And then, when the dream had begun to fade, when I could already feel the cold of the waking world creeping back in, he leaned close. "Don't forget," he murmured. "Sarah is our daughter, too. No matter what. Don't lose sight of that. Don't make the same mistake I did." "Edward." I tried to cling to him, but he was already dissolving, vanishing into the thinning veil of the dream. "Edward, please don't leave me." My hands closed over nothing and panic clawed up my throat. "Edward, I can't." I woke with a jolt, wet cheeks, and a hollow in my chest that no amount of air could fill. All through the day, his words haunted me. "Don't make the same mistake I did." I might not have been the one to cast her out, but I'd stood by and done nothing about it. I'd been angry, so consumed by Celeste's pain and grief that I had blinded myself to Sarah's. 10 years, an entire decade, stood like a wall between us. Did I truly think a single visit, a handful of stubborn words, could tear it down? No. Crumbling those defenses would take more than just persistence. It would take humility. But I wasn't sure I knew how to do that. After being Luna for more than 30 years, laying my pride down did not come easy. That evening, I invited Ethan and Celeste to dinner, and to my surprise, they obliged. Ethan took Edward's place at the head of the table, and Celeste sat at my side, her fork scraping idly against her plate. For the first time in a long time, I did not see only them. I saw the empty chair beside Ethan, the one Sarah should have occupied. And the thought formed unbidden, fragile but persistent. Perhaps it wasn't too late. "Ethan," I said softly, laying down my fork. "I was thinking, perhaps we could invite Saraphina home for a meal, to sit together again, as a family." The words had barely left my lips when a sharp crash split the air. Celeste's plate shattered against the marble floor, fragments scattering, food splattering across the polished surface. "Mom?" she hissed, her voice trembling with something between rage and hurt. "Did I hear you correctly? You want to invite her?" Her fingers curled into fists around her fork like a weapon. I straightened my back, though my pulse jumped. "Yes, Celeste, she is family, whether you like it or not. Your father." My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. Edward's dying wish was to see a harmonious family. That includes Sarah. How could I make them understand that the daughter Edward had asked for, the child he longed for in his final moments, was actually Sarah? Celeste's chair screeched against the floor as she shot to her feet, trembling. "So that's it? Even you've chosen her now, after everything? After all these years, when you begged me to come back, when you cried and pleaded for me to return, and now that I have, you run after Sarah instead?" Her eyes glittered with wetness, but the fury in them burned hotter. "She's the reason I had to leave in the first place, and yet you choose her over me?" She threw the fork across the room, and it clattered into a vase that wobbled and crashed to the floor. "You might as well have left me to die abroad." "Celeste!" Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the tension. He slammed his hand against the table, rattling the silverware. "Enough! We've discussed this matter before. You're being childish. It's been 10 years. Give it a fucking rest." Celeste's breath came in sharp, ragged pulls. She looked at Ethan, then at me, her eyes full of betrayal, of disbelief, and then she turned on her heel. Her footsteps pounded out of the room, and a door slammed with a violence that made the chandelier tremble. Silence fell heavily over the dining room. I stared down at the shards of porcelain scattered across the floor, my appetite gone, my hands shaking faintly in my lap. I whispered more to myself than to Ethan. Why does it always feel like no matter what I do, I am failing one of them? Ethan said nothing, his face a mask of tension, his jaw tight. But inside me, Edward's words echoed still. "Don't make the same mistake I did." Celeste's POV. I stormed out of the house, fury burning so hot inside me it felt like it would flay the skin off my bones. It was an old, familiar kind of heat, one I used to wear like armor as a child when I didn't get my way, except this wasn't childish anymore. This was different. This was bone-deep, grown-up rage, the kind that came from betrayal, from humiliation. And unlike when I was a child, everyone didn't immediately jump to do my bidding to appease me. My heels clicked against the pavement like angry punctuation, echoing back at me in the cooling evening air. The rhythm wasn't just sound, it was the only thing tethering me to myself, reminding me that I still had power, still had presence. I went out through the manor gates, down the street, and I didn't even know where I thought I was going. My body moved before my mind did, powered by outrage, by a refusal to sit one more second at that table listening to them spew absolute fucking bullshit. Behind me, there was nothing, no hurried footsteps, no voice calling my name. Neither Ethan nor Mother came after me. Their absence was like a slap to the face. It pressed in on me, heavy, suffocating, cruel in its indifference. And it stung, sharp and intimate, like only family could manage. How dare they? How dare they sit at their perfect little dinner and talk about poor, misunderstood Sarah like she was a victim, like she didn't rip our family apart the night she ripped my heart out? She was the villain, and yet somehow they acted like she deserved sympathy, as if her sad little sob story excused the chaos she left in her wake, as if her suffering outweighed mine when she'd been the cause of it in the first place. My own blood family, treating me like I was the intruder, like I was the one who didn't belong. It was grotesque. I was the one who'd been loyal, who had carried the family name like a crown, who had bent myself into whatever shape Mother demanded. Perfect, polished, precious Celeste. I was the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. And still, they dared to put her on a pedestal and leave me standing in the dirt. I did not fucking deserve this, and I wouldn't fucking take it. I yanked my phone out of my bag and jabbed at Kieran's number. It only rang once before his voice slid into my ear. Flat, distracted. Celeste, I'm in a meeting. Just that. No warmth, no affection. The words tumbled out, breathless, desperate. Surely he would hear it, the crack in my voice, the plea woven underneath. Kieran, I'm so upset. You won't believe what Mother and... I said I was in a meeting, Celeste. If it's urgent, tell the driver to take you wherever you want. You have my card and no qualms about using it as you wish. I'll speak to you later. The line went dead. I stared at the glowing screen incredulously, the rejection sharp as glass. It lodged in my chest, cutting every time I tried to breathe. When had this happened? How had this happened? How had I gone from the darling of my family, the apple of Kieran's eye, to this outcast? I was Celeste Eloise Lockwood, damn it. Adoration was my birthright. I didn't claw my way into the spotlight. I was the spotlight. My laughter lit up rooms, my beauty turned heads, my charm could muddle even the sharpest minds. Loyalty was never something I begged for. It came crawling to me, desperate, inevitable, like moths to flame. The thought of losing that pull, of no longer being the gravity that every room revolved around, was intolerable. They had no right to look away. Sarah had no right to have them look at her. I hurled my phone down onto the pavement. It skidded across the ground with a satisfying crack. A few pedestrians glanced over. I threw them a glare sharp enough to cut, daring them to comment. They looked away. Good. Let them. At least strangers still remembered how to fear me. Drive, I snapped at the driver Kieran had given me as I slid into the back seat. Take me to the mall. Now. The words came out clipped. Vicious. Control, I reminded myself. Power. If they would not give it to me, I would take it back piece by piece. He scurried to obey. By the time we reached the mall, my blood had cooled into something darker, heavier. Rage was one thing, but humiliation, that was poison. It ate slowly, leaving nothing but bitterness. And oh, how it ate. Already I felt it working through me, gnawing away at my composure, leaving behind only the ache of being dismissed, diminished. I wasn't going to sit at home like some abandoned pet. If no one wanted to choose me, then I would choose myself. Yes, I would not beg for their affection. I would not wait for them to come to their senses. I would not cower in the fucking shadows like Saraphina. I would remind them all why the world once revolved around me. The first thing I did was buy a new phone. And as soon as the pimply nerd behind the counter set it up, I summoned the few people who still knew how to orbit me. Friends, if you could call them that. But they were loyal in their own way, loyal to spectacle, to drama, to me. Right now, that was enough. Celeste, hey. Abby's voice bubbled through the line. Always bubbly, always eager, a golden retriever in designer heels. Meet me at the mall. Bring Emma. I need you both. I didn't explain, didn't beg. They came because they always came. Because it was a privilege to be summoned by me. It was a privilege to be in my presence. We tore through boutiques like a storm. My hands barely touched the fabrics before assistants rushed to drape them over my arms, to start tallying my purchases. Shoes, silk blouses, a fur coat I didn't even like. What did it matter? Every swipe of Kieran's card was a band-aid against the wound they'd all torn open. Hopefully, his phone buzzed and beeped relentlessly and disrupted his stupid fucking meeting that was more important than me. The bags piled higher, the receipts longer, but the hollow ache inside me only grew. Abby twirled in front of a mirror, arms heavy with bracelets. Tell me you're wearing something like this for the engagement party? It's going to be the event of the year. Her words hit me like a stone. I smiled too quickly, too sharply. Of course, you think I'd let Sarah outshine me? As if she could, Emma giggled. The sound grated on my nerves, though I forced myself to join in to let the laughter smooth the edges of my trembling composure. Speaking of which, Abby chimed in, when is the engagement party, Celeste? My pulse skipped. Because the truth, the ugly, choking truth, was that since Kieran got back from the island, he'd been tactically avoiding any talk about the engagement party. Every time I brought it up, he brushed it off or downright shut it down, and it was always scraps of the same flimsy excuse. The timing is wrong. My parents missed our announcement party, but they shouldn't miss my engagement party. Once the rogue attacks are solved and Daniel can return, my parents will too, and we can talk about it. Even when she wasn't actively involved, Saraphina still found a way to ruin my life. Kieran had been different since he returned from that island, even more so than usual. He'd only drifted further from me, throwing himself into his work, barely spending any time at home. All I got these days were one-word answers and exasperated sighs. I felt like I was watching helplessly as he constructed a wall between us. Every second of silence and distance, a new brick. And when I thought back to what Sarah said in the hospital, no, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't consider that abomination for one fucking second. Kieran's been a little distracted lately, I finally answered. I would not give Abby or Emma the satisfaction of knowing the trouble in my paradise. I wasn't naive enough to believe they had my best interests at heart. So I tweaked the truth. And do you know why? I didn't wait for them to reply. Sarah? The name tasted like venom. Abby and Emma leaned in curiously as I continued. She bewitched him on that island, twisting him against me, and now she's working with Maya, poisoning Ethan, poisoning Mother. Suddenly, everyone treats her like she's the poor little outcast, as if I haven't bled for this family too. Their faces shifted, first surprise, then indignation on my behalf. That bitch, Abby hissed. Emma slammed a pair of heels back onto the display shelf. Sarah always plays the fragile one, the rogue attacks, the shooting. She's made herself the poster girl for victimhood. But you're the real victim, Celeste, and when everyone sees that, they'll see her real face. People like her don't get to win. Her words lit something in me. Yes, that was the truth. Sarah's power lay in her illusion, this mask of suffering, of silent endurance. All it would take was a crack, a reversal, and everyone would see what I saw, a manipulative bitch. I leaned closer to my friends, lowering my voice until it felt like we were conspiring in the dark. Exactly. She doesn't have a monopoly on being the victim. The focus just needs to shift from her for a second, and then the world will know who the true serpent is. I thought of Mother's face at dinner, that flash of disappointment, as if I were the problem. I thought of Ethan scolding me like I was a child. I thought of Kieran brushing me off as though I were nothing but an inconvenient weight dragging him down. My lips curled. The taste of it, plans, vengeance, control, was intoxicating. Abby smirked, clinking her shopping bags together like glasses in a toast. Then let's help the world see it. Saraphina's Pove. My days off were as rare and precious as hidden gems. No rigorous training schedule. No sadistic drills threatening to kill me, no psychotic trainer doing her very best to combust my eardrums. The only downside was that I was so used to movement and action that I spent all of 20 extra minutes in bed before I got too restless and shot to my feet. I turned the energy on the house. I tackled the sink full of dishes, wiped down the shelves, and even folded the laundry that had grown into a mini mountain, moving from chore to chore until the rooms felt lighter. By the time I finished, the floors gleamed and the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and lavender air freshener. Still, it wasn't enough. The restlessness lingered, drumming through my veins. My gaze drifted out the window to where the lawn waited, strewn with dry leaves like a silent challenge. Grabbing the rake, I stepped outside. The late summer air wrapped around me, thick with the scent of grass and apple pie from someone's open kitchen window. My neighbor, Mrs. Harlow, waved from her porch, her terrier barking like it had some grand announcement to make. I rarely conversed with my neighbors, but I'd lent Mrs. Harlow a cup of sugar once, and she decided that I was her new best friend. "Doing some gardening today, dear," she called. I smiled, tucking a stray hair behind my ear. "Trying to, before my front lawn turns into a jungle and swallows me." She chuckled, then launched into a brief ramble about her grandson starting school this fall. It was the kind of small, simple conversation that shouldn't have meant much, but for me, it did. To talk about children and school and weather, to be ordinary and mundane for 5 minutes, felt almost decadent. The last of my restless energy was spent at the farmer's market, and by the time I was walking up my driveway with my grocery bags cutting into my palms, I was humming happily under my breath because the best part of today was yet to come. Lucian was coming over later this evening after some work he had to take care of, and we were going to cook together. Another seemingly simple thing that made my heart flutter. I think it was the domesticity of it. Kieran and I had never made toast together, let alone cooked a whole meal. And the thought of Lucian in my kitchen, sleeves rolled, as we argued over whose recipes tasted better, brought a silly, giddy smile to my face. But of course, I was Saraphina, and having one entire good day to myself was just completely unfathomable. My smile dropped as I froze at the base of my porch steps and beheld the bane of my existence. Celeste was standing at my doorstep like she owned the house, the late sun painting her hair gold, her posture all effortless grace. My heart dropped into my stomach, the good mood draining from me like water through a sieve. I tightened my grip on the grocery bags and took one long, deep breath. Then I shifted my eyes past her as if she were just a shadow. Maybe if I ignored her long enough, she'd vanish into thin air. Oh, a girl could wish. Sarah, her hand shot out, grabbing mine before I could turn the key. Her touch was light, deceptively delicate, like a snake testing the warmth of its prey. "Wait, please, I didn't come here to fight." I raised my eyes slowly, while careful not to let my expression show anything, letting my silence be answer enough. "I came to apologize," she said, the words rolling off her tongue with the smoothness of an actor reciting well-rehearsed lines. I almost laughed. Apologize? Were we seriously repeating the spa charade again? Celeste Lockwood didn't apologize. She maneuvered, she twisted, she cut, and she didn't accept fault for anything. Still, I said nothing, slipping my hand free. "Mother?" I momentarily lost my composure and flinched. Celeste caught that and pressed on. "During dinner the other day, she spoke about you, longingly. She said she hoped you might come over for dinner sometime. She misses you, Sarah. We all do." We all do. I could handle bitchy Celeste. I could handle bitter, acidic, toxic Celeste. But when she did this, when she pretended like she actually had a heart beating behind her ribcage, like we were actually family who could care about each other, it stung more than I cared to admit, because I knew it was all part of her act, and it made me feel stupid for wishing it wasn't. "I'm busy," I said curtly, reaching for the door again. But Celeste, as always, had come armed. From her bag, she pulled out a thick photo album worn around the edges, its cover frayed by time. She thrust it toward me like a peace offering. "Mother wanted you to have this. Old pictures. Memories." I should have stepped in and slammed the door in Celeste's face, but something inside me hesitated. Foolishly, I admit. A part of me, the child I once was, still wanted scraps from my family, still wanted proof that I'd mattered enough to be preserved in photographs. So I accepted it, but I'd be damned if I let her into my home. I set the grocery bags down at my feet and opened the album. My breath caught. Every page was Celeste. Celeste at recitals, Celeste at birthdays, Celeste in gowns, Celeste with flowers, Celeste and... My chest tightened. Kieran. Their smiles preserved forever in glossy print, intimate moments framed for eternity. Not a trace of me. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages, my vision blurring the longer I looked for myself. The silence between us thickened until... There it was, Celeste's endgame. In the picture, I was 15 again, standing at the edge of the packhouse courtyard, eyes burning, face tight and red with humiliation. 15 years later, and I could still hear the whispers that had snaked around me like smoke, the laughter that had rung in my ears like church bells. The day the truth had spilled, the day everyone learned I had no wolf. The photographer had captured me at my lowest, wide-eyed, brittle, half drowned in shame. Around me, blurred in the background, were the smirks of those who had mocked. I slammed the album shut. accidentally included, I suppose. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Celeste feigned innocence, widening her dew eyes. Of course, I didn't notice that one. You know I would never. Stop. My chest heaved. Was it an accident 15 years ago, too? Her lips parted, the mask slipping for just a fraction of a second. Father told us not to tell, I pressed, words scraping out of me like poisoned daggers. He said to keep it within the family until we understood, until we could come up with a solution, but somehow everyone in the pack knew before I'd even come to terms with it. I looked up at her, crimson creeping into my vision. You told them, under the guise of concern. You asked around if anyone knew how to cure a wolfless werewolf. I shoved the album at her chest, and she clutched it with one hand. I sneered. Worried little Celeste, looking for a cure for her poor wolfless sister. The memory burned. I could still see her that night, head bowed, the eyes glistening as she confessed to Father that she had been the reason the whole pack knew I didn't have a wolf. She pretended that she was only trying to help, that she only revealed my deepest flaw and my family's most shameful secret because she cared too much. And Father, he had believed her. Everyone had. She was sweet, selfless Celeste, and I was useless, broken Sarah. That was the first time in my life that I ever experienced anger so potent that I lost control. And even now I remember the chilling satisfaction that ran through me as I shoved Celeste in my anger. She had fallen and merely scraped her palms, but she'd screamed like I'd taken a saw to her wrist, and the pack had reacted as though I'd committed some unspeakable crime. That was the first day I felt the sting of my father's palm across my cheek. From then on, their disgust had a sharper, crueler edge. More than being a pathetic, wolfless outcast, I was the crazy bitch who hurt the sister who only ever cared for her. Celeste blinked at me now, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd continue the charade. But she leaned closer, her perfume wrapping around me, her whisper venomous. Of course I told them, deliberately. Did you really think I'd let you use your weakness to receive sympathy? No, what you deserved is scorn. Gods, my sister had never looked uglier than she did in this moment. Wolfless, pitiful Sarah, born marked by the moon goddess herself as tainted. And you can train as hard as you want. You can kick and punch and run, but you will never, ever be more than what you are. Her lips curled, teeth bared, broken. Celeste's head whipped to the side, hair spilling forward as the crack of my palm against her cheek echoed around us. For a moment, silence. Then she laughed, low, eerie, chilling. A sound that curdled the air. You're so fucking predictable, she whispered, eyes gleaming. She edged around but kept facing me and started walking backwards. That's why you'll always be behind. Step by step, she backed away, her smile growing into something vicious and primal. That's why you'll never have the life you want. She stopped at the end of my driveway and raised her voice. That's why I'll always win. I frowned. What? She stepped out into the street. Celeste, get the fuck out of the... You're not the only one who can fake a crisis, sweetie. She winked, and in one deliberate motion she let herself fall, backward. My scream ripped from my throat as a horn blared, tires screeched, then impact Saraphina's pove. Hours later I could still hear the screech of tires, could still see the sickening sway of Celeste's body, the blur of her hair as she toppled sideways into the street. Even after she disappeared into the ambulance, and I climbed in after her, after the sirens wailed us down the road, Mrs. Harlow's terrier racing after us, my chest wouldn't unclench. I sat there in a haze, the once serene world around me suddenly too bright, too loud, too fast. And so fucking confusing. I couldn't fathom it. You're not the only one who can fake a crisis, sweetie. I remembered once when Celeste got nothing more than a paper cut and treated it as though she'd been mortally wounded. She shrieked that she could see bone, demanded an ambulance, and even sprawled across the chaise like a tragic heroine awaiting her last rites. The family doctor was summoned for what had already stopped bleeding, and Celeste milked it for weeks, refusing chores, parading around with a useless bandage, and sighing dramatically whenever someone asked her to lift so much as a book. Celeste had always been cruel, always cunning, ridiculously dramatic. But this, throwing herself into the path of a moving car, my brain scrambled around the image like it couldn't make sense of it, couldn't fit the sheer insanity into the outline of the girl I'd once thought I knew. Everything in the emergency ward was happening in a dizzying blur. Nurses in pale scrubs moved with hurried, sharp precision, calling out codes and requests. The sliding doors groaned behind me again and again as more people swept in. My mother arrived first. Her heels clicked like gunshots across the linoleum, her fur coat dragging along the floor. Her lipstick was immaculate, her face tight with controlled panic. Only the slight mascara smudges under her eyes hinted at her distress. "Where is she? My daughter. Where's Celeste?" I shrank back automatically, once again reminded that the daughter my parents looked for would always be Celeste. And then Ethan appeared, tall and grim, his hand brushing her shoulder as though he could temper her storm. His presence should have been grounding, and maybe it was for my mother. Instead, it rattled me further. He glanced at me briefly, his expression unreadable, cold perhaps, or just stunned. I couldn't tell. Finally, Kieran arrived. His stride was longer, urgent, his hair damp from the drizzle that had begun outside. When his eyes landed on me, something unreadable flickered there. Suspicion? Concern? I couldn't pin it down before the moment broke. It was disorienting, all of them rushing in like a tide, pulling air from the room, leaving me stranded at its center. It almost reminded me of when my father had been on his deathbed. But the similarities niggled at me, and I almost laughed at the absurdity. They would rush to the hospital for my father, they would rush for dramatic Celeste. But nobody rushed like this when I'd almost died giving birth to Daniel. I should have left as soon as they all came. I should have known that all of us being in close proximity with heightened emotions wouldn't end well. But I kept seeing Celeste fall back into the road, kept hearing the tires screeching. I'd stay just long enough to know she was okay. She was batshit crazy, but she was, unfortunately, still my sister. After a while, a doctor appeared, pulling down his mask. They all surged forward to hear the news. "She's stable. Mild concussion, a wrist fracture, some bruising on her ribs, and minor scrapes. We're keeping her for observation, but she's out of immediate danger." Relief washed through the room, through them. Mother exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours, clutching Ethan's sleeve as he held onto her elbow. Kieran's jaw unclenched, the muscles twitching as he ran a hand over his face, and tension flowed out of him. I should have felt the same. Relief, gratitude that she wasn't broken beyond repair. But instead, all I felt was that clench in my stomach, the dizzying aftershock of watching her nearly shatter herself for spectacle. "You're not the only one who can fake a crisis, sweetie." After the doctor's words, a shuffle of movement followed. Relieved sighs turning into urgent nods as the nurse gestured for us to follow. The sterile corridors seemed to hum with too bright lights and too loud footsteps as we trailed behind, our little parade of strained faces and clenched hands. I walked with them, though every step felt detached, like I was floating above my own body. Inside her room, Celeste lay propped up against a stack of pillows, looking far more fragile than I'd ever seen her, and yet still somehow immaculately put together the way only Celeste could be. Her hair was in perfect waves down her shoulders, her arm cradled in a cast, ribs bound in bandages that peeked beneath the hospital gown. It was the kind of image that demanded sympathy, delicate, breakable. And then, of course, she started speaking. Celeste's voice cracked as her eyes landed on me. Her skin was pale, her lips glossy. "What is she doing here?" A question I was beginning to ask myself. "How can you show your face here?" she rasped after shoving me into the street. The accusation landed like stones hurled across the ward. My mouth fell open. I was too shocked to form sound, let alone words. "Are you sad?" she continued, her eyes gleaming. "Are you upset I didn't die like you wanted?" This fucking bitch. I was still in the process of processing the trap I had waltzed into when my mother whirled around so fast her coat fanned out. Her hand came up, sharp and swift, aiming for my cheek. I was still too stunned to flinch or bother moving. I just froze and braced, but the blow never landed. Kieran's hand shot out, clamping around my mother's wrist midair. His voice cut across the room, low but firm. "Margaret, don't." Mother's eyes blazed. "She tried to kill my daughter." "We don't know the full story yet," Kieran said, his tone sharp enough to discourage argument. He turned to me, his voice softening. "Sarah, what happened? I stared at him, at all of them. At Celeste, who lay there like a broken doll, her lashes fluttering, that her mouth curled into the faintest smirk she thought no one could see. At my mother, who, just a couple of days ago, sat in my living room claiming I was still her daughter, claiming she would never abandon me. Now her eyes blazed with loathing and accusation, the hand she'd unhesitatingly raised to strike me still hovering in Kieran's grasp. Tell him. Tell them. The words crowded my throat, desperate to explain. I wanted to scream it, that Celeste had lost her mind, that she'd leapt in front of that car like a fucking psycho, that this was all part of her plan to turn the entire world against me. But my mother's doubt had already sunk in. She was still glaring at me, still trembling with rage, still ready to strike if Kieran let go. And suddenly, I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was younger, smaller, in that suffocating house, standing against the wall, holding the jagged pieces of the vase Celeste had broken in my hand as my mother's shadow loomed. Her disbelief, her scorn, her sharp hand, all of it merged with now, seamless and suffocating. They'd never believed me then. Why would they believe me now? A bitter laugh ripped from my throat. Explain? To you? My voice shook with something cold. What would be the point? You've already decided. You always do. Celeste is always the saint, and I'm always the bad guy. Sarah, Kieran said, reaching for me. I jerked my arm away before he could hold me, but where his fingers brushed my skin seared like iron. No, I snapped. If you really believe I would do this. I turned my gaze to my mother. If you truly believe I would push my own sister in front of a car, then call the police. Charge me. I held my hands out, wrists pressed together. Her gaze flickered for a moment before hardening again. That's all you have to say? I dropped my hands. Their faces blurred. Margaret's fury, Ethan's unreadable stare, Celeste's triumphant weakness, Kieran's stormy silence. I couldn't bear it for a second longer. I have nothing to say. I'm not dealing with this bullshit. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. I turned away and walked out. My harsh breathing was a hollow echo that followed me through the ward, down the corridor, and out the sliding doors. The world outside slapped me with cold rain. The sky had cracked open, pouring sheets of water down the hospital steps. I gasped at its bite but didn't slow. My hair plastered against my cheeks, my clothes clung to me, but I couldn't summon the will to find shelter or an umbrella. Let it soak me. Let it wash their poison off me. My chest ached, the numbness finally breaking into pain so sharp it felt like my ribs were splintering. I pressed my palm against my sternum like I could hold myself together, but the ache only deepened. How could they believe Celeste's lies so easily? Was I really so monstrous in their eyes? A sob clawed its way up my throat, but I bit it down. Not here. Not now. I was halfway to the curb, ready to trudge home in the storm, when a hand closed around my arm. Sarah, wait. I spun, heart racing, and found Ethan, Saraphina's pove. Ethan's grip wasn't rough, but it was firm, unyielding. Rain streaked down his face, making his expression hard to read. For once, though, there was something softer in his eyes, hesitation, maybe even regret. I'll drive you home, he said simply. The offer stunned me more than my mother's slap, more than Celeste's accusation. For a moment, I just stared at him, blinking water from my lashes. Something twisted in my chest. Old wounds and fresh ones colliding. I wanted to tell him to let go, to leave me in the rain, to let me dissolve until there was nothing left. I yanked my arm back. No, thank you. My voice came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't soften it. If you're planning another lecture, Ethan, don't bother. I'm not in the mood. And if you try anyway, well... I gave him a look that was equal parts warning and promise. I can fight back now. He didn't flinch. If anything, he looked almost amused. I don't doubt it, he said. Maya never stops praising you, says you're her most outstanding student. If anyone can take me down these days, it's probably you. I blinked, caught off guard by the lack of sarcasm. His tone was matter-of-fact, not mocking. Still, I folded my arms. Then all the more reason for you to step aside. Go back to Celeste. She's the one lying in a hospital bed, not me. I know she'll be fine, he said without hesitation. The certainty in his voice startled me, and I arched a brow. You sound very sure for someone whose sister just got hit by a car. I'm sure, he said again, this time more quietly, so I had to strain to hear him over the pouring rain. Then his gaze cut back to me, unwavering. And for what it's worth, I don't believe you pushed her. The words hit me like a blow. Not because I needed his validation. I didn't, not anymore, but because it had been so long since anyone in that family had believed anything I had to say. I tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. That's perfect then. That undoes all the years of scorn and disdain. He didn't rise to the barb. Instead, he just nodded toward his car parked at the curb. Come on, the state you're in, you shouldn't go home alone. I swiped a wet clump of hair from my face. I'm fine. You're not, he said gently. Maya will kill me if I let you walk home in the pouring rain. And he hesitated, as though swallowing something difficult. It's my duty, as your brother. The word brother stuck in my ears like a burr. My brother. When had he ever acted like one? Why was he now choosing to stay by my side instead of Celeste's after all these years? My instinct was to refuse, to walk into the rain and prove I didn't need any of them. But my body was betraying me. My legs were shaky, my chest tight. The cold was already seeping into my bones, and the thought of standing on a curb waiting for a cab in this storm suddenly felt unbearable. Fine, I muttered, brushing past him toward his car, but if I even smell a reprimanding speech, I'm throwing myself out of the door. He chuckled. Then you and Celeste can be roommates. I spun around and shot him a look, and he immediately clamped his mouth shut, his lips twitching from the effort. I turned away before he could see me fight my own smile. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something familiar. Maya, I realized with a grudging smile. I slid into the passenger seat, dripping rain onto the floor mat. Ethan got in on his side, started the engine, and instantly turned up the heat. Here, he said, handing me a thick sweatshirt from the back seat. I took it gratefully and pulled it on, hugging my arms around myself. For a while, the only sound was the swish of wipers cutting through the storm. Then Ethan reached forward and fiddled with the knob of the stereo. Moments later, music filled the space, soft at first. I frowned. It was familiar. The melody filled the car, soft and melancholy, echoing from some distant memory. Gentle guitar picking, a tender voice that had seemed to understand everything I couldn't say aloud. Not exactly what I'd choose now, but the kind of thing I used to play late at night, headphones clamped over my ears, letting the melodies carry away the restless hum of my own thoughts. I glanced at him. Really? You listen to Fleetwood Mac? His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. I wasn't sure what you liked anymore. Paxton mentioned you used to listen to this. Thought it was worth a try. That stopped me. Paxton, our old butler. He'd been one of the few constants in the Lockwood Manor growing up, one of the few people who showed me kindness in the quiet, unnoticed small ways that mattered, who didn't treat me as less than. My throat tightened. That was a long time ago. I know. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. After the... He cleared his throat. Cinnamon raspberry incident, I've been trying to remember things, trying to see them differently. I gave a short, humorless laugh. What's this, some sudden bout of brotherly guilt? Or are you just hoping that if you play the right song, I'll march back into that hospital room and apologize to Celeste? His head turned toward me briefly, his expression unreadable in the glow of the dashboard lights. No, he said, firmly. That's not it. I snorted. Sure, okay. I'm serious, Sarah. His voice had an edge now, not sharp but intense, like he needed me to hear him. I've started to realize how many mistakes I made, how much I let myself be blinded like we're brother and sister. And we've spent so many years acting otherwise, I don't want to spend whatever time we have left resenting each other. Something in me twisted at the sincerity I thought I heard there, but I shoved it down. So what? This is your redemption arc? Tell me you believe me now and all is forgiven. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I don't even know if I deserve it. His jaw tightened, his gaze fixed firmly on the road. I know you. I know you think I don't, but I do. And sure, lately you've changed. You've become reclusive, difficult, even sharp-edged, but you've never been cruel. You would never hurt someone on purpose. My eyes narrowed. Do you hear yourself? If I've become sharp-edged and difficult, it's because you all made me that way. He nodded. I won't argue that, but what I said stands. You would never hurt anyone, Sarah. That isn't you. The words made me want to look away, but I couldn't. My chest hurt, like he was prying open a wound I'd buried under scar tissue. You really think that? My voice was low, harsh. That I'm incapable of cruelty? You literally just said I changed. You can't tell up to what extent. You'd be surprised what someone can learn to stomach when they're pushed far enough. Because here's the deep, unnerving truth. If I'd been standing in front of Celeste at that moment and I'd seen the car rushing down the street, I don't know that I wouldn't have pushed her. I didn't know what to do with that. He shook his head. Not you. Some things don't change, Sarah. Not the core of who we are. I remember you refusing to eat chicken for weeks because you saw one killed in the yard. You cried yourself sick over it. That's not someone who would shove her sister into the path of a car. The memory hit me like a sucker punch, vivid and embarrassing. My younger self, devastated over something so small. I felt exposed, as if he'd reached in and dragged out a version of me I hadn't allowed myself to remember in years. Maybe that girl's gone, I whispered. Maybe she's not, he said quietly. Silence stretched, the wipers squeaked back and forth. My reflection in the rain-streaked window looked pale, tired, unrecognizable even to me. Part of me still wanted to lash out, to accuse him of ulterior motives, to spit that I wasn't stupid enough to fall for a change of heart this late in the game. But another part, smaller, quieter, just felt tired. Too tired to keep sorting through the sincerity and the lies. So I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes. Whatever, Ethan. Believe what you want. Right now, I just want to get home. Then that's what we'll do, he said, and for once he didn't push further. We drove the rest of the way in uneasy quiet, the storm softening to a drizzle outside. And I could almost imagine that it was a reflection of the ease in the atmosphere between us. Saraphina's povey. The first moments back in my apartment were quiet, almost shockingly so. I glanced at the scattered grocery bags I'd hastily thrown inside before rushing off in the ambulance. There was a tub of ice cream in there that I knew was a goner. It was hard to believe I was still in the same day that had promised to be peaceful and restful. But at least now, I was free of the chaos. No judgments or accusations or pain. Just me. Just the sound of the rain pattering faintly against the window, the scent of the lingering storm mingling with the faint warmth of home. Ethan's presence in the car lingered in my chest like a ghost I wasn't sure I wanted to exorcise. The ride home still confused me. He hadn't lectured me, he hadn't tried to twist my words or corner me. He just believed me. For the first time in what felt like forever, my brother and I had shared a conflict-free moment together. And in that, there was a thread of comfort, a small, glimmering hope that maybe, just maybe, not everyone I'd ever counted on was completely lost to me. Oddly, Kieran too. He had stood by me today, his patience and defense quiet but firm. I could still feel the echo of his presence as he stood between me and my mother, the warmth of his intervention like a shield. But even with that, my chest felt heavy. Sure, it seemed like my divorce had been some sort of wake-up call, and I was starting to see glimpses of the people I'd once called family. They were starting to act like they actually cared. But the damage, the years of small betrayals, dismissals, slights, and outright cruelty didn't vanish in a single day. That kind of pain lingered, settled into the muscles and bones, into the rhythm of my breath. More than a decade of being treated as inferior, of being undervalued, didn't dissolve with a few conciliatory gestures. Too tired to shower, I simply stripped out of my wet clothes and pulled on an OTS sweatshirt and sweatpants. I sank into my bed, hugging my legs to myself as the light rainfall from outside mixed with the residue of the storm still inside me. I had to put all the confusing thoughts of Ethan and Kieran out of my mind. I'd been doing well without them so far. I hadn't needed them all this time, and I didn't need them now. I exhaled, letting the tension roll from my shoulders. I had to do something to quiet my thoughts, to reclaim myself. I shifted my legs, crossing them in front of me, and closed my eyes. I pressed my palms into my knees. Meditation, yes, that was what I needed now. It sounded so simple, almost laughable, but just like the previous times I'd meditated to find peace, it worked. Bit by bit, my ragged breaths began to even out. The sharp leftover ache in my chest eased, and I could feel serenity settling. Only this time, it was different. The world around me didn't just settle. It expanded, stretched into an uncanny, almost electric clarity. Every sound seemed sharper, clearer. The faint echo of Mrs. Harlow's terrier barking across the street, the distant hum of a lone car, the delicate patter of raindrops on the roof. all weaving together into a rhythm that thrummed in my chest, synchronized with something deep and instinctual inside me. Colors grew vivid in my mind's eye. The gray of the clouds outside glimmered with hints of silver, each droplet on the window pane sparkling like fractured light. Shadows and highlights were enhanced, vibrating with a subtle energy I had never noticed before. My pulse quickened at the sensation, an awareness that went beyond sight and sound, a resonance that felt like a whisper from within, something familiar, like the first time I'd meditated with Lucian in the moon hall. And then, faintly, almost imperceptibly at first, I heard it, the rumble of Lucian's car descending my driveway. My eyes flew open, and for a split second, my heart stuttered in disbelief. Could it be? Was it possible? Could this mean my wolf was stirring, awakening? The connection I had felt in flashes and whispers before now throbbed with insistence, teasing at the edges of my senses. My chest constricted with a mix of awe and fear, a tethered exhilaration that left me trembling. Before the doorbell even rang, I was at the entrance, flinging the door open. The smell of the storm followed him in, mixed with his own signature scent, something warm, musky, and undeniably Lucian. He barely had time to drop the bag he carried before I flew into his arms, ignoring the moisture clinging to my hair and wrapping my arms around his neck. His laughter vibrated through me as he held me tightly to his powerful frame. Well, this is a nice new way of being greeted. I pulled back, giddy laughter spilling out of me. I think I can sense her. I think my wolf, she's awake or close. I don't know, but I was just meditating and I felt... Evidence, he said, voice soft. He was smiling at me gently, eyes bright with pride. It's evidence of the awakening. You're progressing, Sarah. That's good, really good. I squealed, burying my head in the crook of his neck. The world outside faded. Storm, rain, the weight of the day. Only Lucian, the solidity of him, the warmth of his arms around me, the amazing reality that I was closer than ever to my wolf, mattered. He chuckled, and after a while, gently set me on my feet. But he still held on to me, pulling back just far enough to look at me. This calls for a celebration, he declared. What do you say we leave the cooking for another day and go out to eat? Someplace special. And just like that, a dark cloud rolled in, overshadowing the sunshine of my happiness. I shook my head, cheeks flushed. Not going out again, not today. My voice held a tinge of somberness that I couldn't hide, and Lucian noticed immediately. Hey, he said, his voice soft. What happened? I inhaled sharply, shaking my head. It's a long story. He took my hand, his grip steady and warm as he led me to the living room, gently pulling me down onto the sofa and sitting next to me. I'm listening, he said in that firm voice that didn't leave a single doubt that I had the full force of his attention. And so I told him the whole tale. The way Celeste had shown up at my doorstep yet again like the world's most frustrating game of whack-a-mole. The photo album and her revelation of what she'd done 15 years ago. Then I told him the way she'd toppled into the street, the screech of tires, the chaos, the hospital, the accusations. My voice wavered at first, then steadied with each word. Each phrase was a brick I laid to release some of the weight I carried. Lucian's expression hardened as I recounted the drama. That's outrageous. His voice shook with restrained fury. She needs to be held accountable. I'll talk to my legal team and they'll take care of this. Celeste won't get away with what she's trying to do. I held up a hand, shaking my head. No, I'll handle it. I told you I don't want you to concern yourself with my family drama. Sarah. I squeezed his hand. It's okay, I promise. Besides, I bet Celeste is having a worse time than I am right now. She hates getting hurt, hates the mere sight of blood. Just imagining her lying in the hospital bed, wondering if the bitch of a pain is worth it, brings a smile to my face. I tried to smile reassuringly for Lucian's benefit. He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, scanning me as though deciding whether to push or relent. I understand, he said finally. My smile eased. Thank you. He nodded, his jaw still tight. Were her injuries severe? I shrugged. Concussion, bruised ribs, sprained wrist. I fought back a laugh at his look of disappointment. He shook his head. I can't believe she would go so far. What kind of point was she trying to prove? Honestly, I have no fucking idea. I was so shocked. I know she feels strongly about Kieran, but to throw herself into danger like that over him. I shook my head, confusion warring with unease. Is that some kind of twisted reflection of the mate bond? No, Lucian said firmly. That is not what the mate bond does to you. I blinked. What does it do? It doesn't make you crazy, not like that. It makes you want to be the best part of yourself you can be. It makes you stronger, better. It completes you, fills you up like nothing else. His voice took on a wistful quality that made my breath still. It's like searching for something your entire life and finally finding it. It's beautiful and scary at the same time, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the feeling of finding your mate. The way he spoke, "Do you?" I swallowed. "Do you want that?" His brows dipped. "What do you mean?" "Your mate. Don't you want that feeling with your mate? Wouldn't you rather spend the rest of your life with your destined mate, other than—" It felt like a thorn had lodged in my throat. Me. A shadow passed across his face so fast that it felt like I imagined it. But then his gaze softened. "And what about you?" he asked quietly, not pressing, but the weight behind the words unmistakable. "When your wolf awakens, if you find someone else, your true mate, what would happen to us?" I hesitated, the possibility sending a ripple through my chest. "I don't know," I admitted finally. Because that was the truth. The thought of getting my wolf was already so fantastical, but the thought of finding my destined mate seemed near impossible. I had no idea how I would feel or what I would do. But what I did know was this. But I can hardly trust another man the way I trust you, Lucian. You've already helped me become better. A better version of myself, more than I ever thought was possible. That's what a mate does, isn't it? So who could be better for me than you?" His lips quirked in a serene smile, and he leaned forward. The space between us shrank until I could feel the warmth of his breath. "Sarah, for the rest of my life, unless you reject me, you're my choice." Heat crept up my neck, cheeks flushing crimson. My hands clenched in my lap as I stared at him, shy, stunned, touched. After being someone's compulsion, it felt surreal to be someone's choice. "You mean it?" I whispered. "I mean it," he said simply. Then he pressed his lips to mine, slow, lingering, and utterly tender. The world, with its storms and accusations and chaos, fell away, leaving only the pulse of warmth and certainty between us. When he pulled back, his forehead resting gently against mine, I breathed shakily. "Even if my wolf, even if she chooses someone else?" I asked, voice trembling slightly. He shook his head, firm but soft. "Not if you don't. You're mine, Sarah. But I won't force your heart, only you decide." A quiet, almost dizzying relief washed over me. "I don't know what the future holds," I admitted, leaning against him. "But right now, this is enough. It is," he said, "and you'll have time. Time to awaken, to grow, to decide. I'll be here." The soft scrape of rain against the glass, the gentle thrum of life outside, the warmth of Lucian beside me. It was a small, perfect world. And for now it was mine, Saraphina's Pove. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness I couldn't explain. The light filtering through my curtains felt duller somehow. The colors washed out as though someone had drawn a gray veil over the world. At first, I thought it was exhaustion from the day before, or maybe I'd slept wrong. But when I reached inward, the way I had done the night before, the way that had sparked everything into brilliance, I found nothing. No heightened clarity. No hum of connection, no whisper of her. My wolf was gone. A sick panic shot through me, cold and metallic. I sat up too quickly, breath shuddering in my throat. "No, no, no," I muttered, pressing my palms to my temples. This can't be real, I thought frantically. Maybe I'm not awake yet. Maybe this is the dream. But the silence inside me was too absolute. Yesterday, the world had sharpened into crystalline detail, sounds layering like a hidden symphony. Now, all I heard was the drone of a distant lawnmower and the ticking of the old clock by my bed. It was as if someone had switched me back to human. By the time I got to OTS, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I went straight to the moon hall and demanded a meditation session with Ilsa. She tried to guide me through breathing exercises, postures meant to center the wolf. She called in one of the healers, Laurel, who set out herbs, their pungent scents crowding the small chamber: sage, rosemary, crushed juniper. Those fragrances were supposed to calm me, ease me into the state of mind to make the connection that had come so easily the day before. They just stung my throat and eyes. I closed my eyes and tried. Again and again. I pulled air in and out of my lungs until I was dizzy, waiting for that shimmer of heightened sight, that delicate pull on my hearing. But each time I reached inward, I found only emptiness. "Breathe slower, Sarah," Ilsa urged softly, her hand hovering near my shoulder but never quite touching. "Don't chase it. Let it come." My voice cracked, frustration simmering through. I did let it come. It was there yesterday. Why not now? Laurel added gently, "Sometimes the wolf stirs in fragments, a glimpse before the true awakening. Don't despair. This isn't uncommon." But I heard the hesitation in her voice. The pause between her words was too long. Her smile stretched too thin. I snapped my eyes open and met her gaze. "You've never seen a case like mine before, have you?" The silence was answer enough. The frustration boiled up. I shot to my feet, the cushion I'd been sitting on toppling to the side. So it was just a dream, a cruel trick? My throat tightened, despair bleeding into anger. "You don't understand. I felt her. I know she was real." Lucien, who had been waiting outside the chamber, came in at the sound of my raised voice. His presence usually steadied me, but today I only felt the weight of his disappointment. At them, at me, maybe at fate itself. "Hey, Sarah." He came to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. But the warmth and comfort I expected didn't come, and it was all I could do not to move away from him. "Ilsa, you promised progress," he said flatly, disapproval clear as his gaze swept between Ilsa and Laurel. "It's not their fault," I snapped, though part of me knew my anger wasn't really for him. If anything, I was embarrassed. He'd told me yesterday that what I felt was evidence of my wolf awakening. What did this mean now? Evidence of her disappearance? At the end of the day, this is my battle to fight, even though it felt like I was already losing. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he held his tongue. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back, shaking my head. "I need air. Then I'll take you." "No," I interrupted. "I need to be alone." Before he could protest, I slipped past him and out the door. The forest welcomed me with its hushed canopy. Damp earth squelched beneath my sneakers, leaves whispering overhead. I ran, half blind with desperation, until my lungs burned, and then I screamed into the trees. "Where are you?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the shadows. "Why did you come only to leave?" Silence. I tried again, softer this time, hands pressed against my ribcage as if I could coax her out. "Please, please, I need you. Just one sign, a breath, anything." But all I heard was the mocking echo of my own voice. A sick thought slithered through me. Maybe it was never real at all. Maybe it was nothing but my own wishful thinking. I sank to the ground, knees digging into damp moss. My chest felt hollow, scraped raw. I could train as hard as I could, but was it even worth it if I couldn't reach the one part of me I so desperately longed for? Maybe it was better when I'd been completely detached. At least then, I hadn't known what I was missing. But now, I knew what it was like. I knew how wonderful and fantastic and fucking amazing the connection could be, and the idea of never achieving that in its fullness was like a knife carving at my heart. A faint cry sliced through my haze of self-loathing and pity. "Help, somebody! Please." I startled, wiping at my eyes. It came from deeper in the woods, and instinct overrode all else. I rose and followed the sound until I stumbled upon a steep incline where an elderly woman had slipped. She clung to a jutting root, her basket of herbs scattered down the slope. "Shit, hold on," I called out. Without thinking, I scrambled down, mud streaking my jeans. Carefully, I crouched low, planting my boots against a stone for balance. I reached for her, bracing myself against the incline as my hand found hers. Her hands trembled in mine, paper-thin but strong enough to grip. Slowly, inch by inch, I guided her upward, the mud giving way beneath her shoes as she leaned heavily into me. When at last her feet found solid ground, I pulled her the final step, and she collapsed lightly against me, her breath shaky, her weight surprisingly feather-like. When she was safe, she wheezed out a laugh, brushing dirt from her dress. "Thank you, child. I'd have broken my neck down there." I managed a weak smile. "It's nothing. Are you hurt?" "Just my pride." Her gaze, sharp and clear despite her age, swept over me. Then her expression softened. "But you're the one who looks hurt." "Oh, no." I spread my arms to show her I was unharmed. "I'm fine." "No." She tapped her temple. "You're heavy here." Then her heart. "And here. I can feel it." I tensed, my defenses reflexively slamming up. "I'm fine," I repeated tightly. "Oh, child," she said softly, brushing her fingers against my cheek. "There is no loss greater than that which you barely had." My chest clenched, a tremor running through me. Something in her certainty unmoored me, as if she could see right through me, like she knew exactly what I was going through. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes as my tongue loosened. I feel like I'm chasing shadows. I feel a connection, and I know it's there. But now it's gone, and I feel like I made it all up, and I exhaled. Did she even understand what I was saying? I barely did myself. I just don't know what to do anymore. The woman tilted her head. "I sense a power inside you, child, an energy within that doesn't vanish. It only hides. Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because pain blinds more than darkness does. Hurt clouds the heart, tricks the senses. You have immense strength inside you, girl, but it flickers because you don't trust it. You don't trust yourself." Her words slid under my skin like balm and blade at once. "When you can stop being misled by appearances, when you learn not to let old wounds sway you," she continued, her eyes glinting strangely in the half-light, "then your wolf will answer. Not as a dream, as truth." I swallowed hard, breath catching. How do you know this?" She only smiled. "I've seen many girls like you, some rise, some falter. The difference is not fate, it's patience." Patience. I pressed my hands together, forcing myself to breathe. Slowly, deliberately, in, out, in, out. I reached inward again, and this time, beneath the noise of doubt, I felt it. A flicker, faint as a candle flame in a storm, but there, a tremor of awareness brushed my skin. The forest brightened slightly, edges gaining a clarity that wasn't only in my eyes but in my blood. Not as sharp as before, not as steady, but enough. My chest flooded with relief. I wasn't completely lost. I could do this. I opened my eyes to thank her, but the old woman was gone. No footsteps, no rustle of fabric, just the whisper of wind through leaves. I spun in a circle, heart pounding. Hello thing. Had she ever been there, or had she been some figment of my desperation, or something else entirely? The thought made my skin prickle. Either way, I straightened my shoulders. Whoever she was right. I'd nearly forgotten patience, forgotten that strength wasn't born in a single night, but in the 1,000 times you choose to stand again. I knew that better than anyone else. The months at OTS hadn't been wasted. I was stronger now than I'd ever been. This was only a setback, and I would endure it as I had endured everything else before now. By the time I left the forest, the sky had bruised into evening purple, but something in me was reluctant to leave the comfort of nature. So I walked, letting my feet carry me where they pleased. I wandered into a small park quite a distance from my house. At first I wondered what brought me here, but then I recognized the oak trees that fringed the perimeter, the swings that swayed gently in the evening breeze, the duck pond at the far end. I was in Daniel's favorite park. Nostalgia and memories rushed me. His laughter as he darted ahead, the way he'd begged me to push him higher on the swing. My chest ached with longing. I pulled out my phone, intending to record a short video for him, maybe by our old bench, something to let him know I was thinking of him. But then I froze, because sitting on our bench, staring wistfully ahead of him, was Kieran, Saraphina's Pof. The moment my gaze landed on him, the good mood I'd fought so hard for scattered like startled birds. It was almost cruel, how quickly the lightness in my chest dimmed. 1 second I'd been clutching Daniel's memory close, imagining the way his laughter might sound if he were here with me, and the next, there was Kieran. Other than that ridiculous drunken phone call and the brief clash in Celeste's hospital room, I'd been doing really well with avoiding Kieran, and I wasn't interested in breaking that streak anytime soon. I pivoted slightly, intent on leaving and vanishing back into the quiet of the trees. That was when his voice carried across the park. "Sarah." I froze. Something in his tone, steady, gentle, almost careful, made my stomach turn. I should have kept walking, but, against my better judgment, I looked back. He had stood from the bench, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, shoulders slightly hunched. He looked off. Nothing like the arrogant alpha who bent the very air around him to his will. He looked tired, weary. I raised my brows, feigning indifference. "What is it now, Kieran? I don't have the energy for theatrics today." His jaw tightened, but instead of snapping back, he exhaled. "It's not theatrics. I want to talk. About Celeste, about everything." My arms folded across my chest instinctively, a shield between us. You'll forgive me if I don't jump for joy at the idea. He stepped closer, not enough to invade, but near enough that I could see the faint shadows under his eyes. Although it manifested itself externally, his exhaustion didn't seem physical. Celeste's out of the hospital now. Your family doctor has been by her side 24/7. She's recovering quickly. His words hit like a stone skipping across water, surface ripples that never reached the depth of my anger. I arched a brow, and I'm supposed to care because, he said carefully, I don't believe you pushed her. The certainty in his voice made my heart stutter. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard him right. My mouth went dry. Excuse me? He met my eyes then, and for once, there was no accusation, no bitterness, no presumption, just honesty. I said, I don't believe you pushed her. I've thought about it a lot, and it doesn't make sense. You wouldn't do something like that. For a second, I simply stared at him. This man, my ex-husband, who had doubted me at every turn, who had never once stood on my side even when we were married, was now standing here saying he believed me. What the hell had he and Ethan been smoking? The déjà vu and irony almost made me laugh. I tilted my head, letting sarcasm curl around the words. Well, that's a refreshing change of heart. What prompted this revelation, Kieran? Did the moon rise differently last night? Or, more likely, is this another ruse? Celeste, put you up to this? His lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't lash back. Instead, he shook his head faintly, as though chastising himself. Believe what you want, but I mean it. I let the silence stretch. A small, dangerous part of me wanted to feel relief, vindication, but I refused to give him that satisfaction. I wasn't foolish enough to lean on his words. Besides, just like Ethan, this change of heart was too little too late. Well, I said, turning away again, if there's nothing else. The rogue case, he said, halting my steps. His shoulders straightened slightly, as though bracing. There's been progress. Something inside me jerked upright at once. What kind of progress? My voice came out sharper than intended, betraying the thin thread of hope that suddenly coiled in my chest. If the rogue case was solved quickly, that meant I was safe and Daniel could come home. Kieran softened, just barely. I'm sorry it's taken this long. I know how much it's cost you, but we're close now, closer than ever. I think I'll be able to resolve it fully soon. When that happens, Daniel can come home. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. My knees nearly gave beneath me, but I locked them, swallowing hard. The very thought of my baby coming home was enough to send light flooding into the cracks of my heart. Thank you, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Then louder, steadier, truly thank you for that, for everything you've done for him. Kieran frowned, looking offended at my gratitude. Sarah, he's my son. I would do anything to keep him safe. He paused, and my heart clenched when he added softly, you too. And with those words, I forced myself to step back emotionally, forcing logic over the ridiculous hope that swelled in my chest. My smile was faint, restrained. But that doesn't change anything else between us. His brows furrowed. Nothing changes? Sarah, I'm trying. That's exactly it, I cut in, voice firm. You're trying to blur the lines again, but there have to be boundaries, Kieran, clear ones, for both our sakes. A muscle in his jaw twitched. His temper, always so quick to rise, flickered in his eyes. Boundaries? When we share a child? Yes. My chin lifted, especially because we share a child. Everything happened too fast after we got divorced that we never had a chance to iron out those factors. I took a deep breath. The timing and place weren't exactly ideal, but there was no time like the present. You'll have visitation rights. I won't interfere with that. I would never dream of keeping Daniel from you, but don't expect him to spend too much time around Celeste, not after everything. His jaw clenched. She's going to be his stepmother. Like hell she'll be. Sarah, you say you believe I didn't push her, right? I pressed. So how did she end up in the street? I can promise you she didn't trip and fall in front of that car. The way his face darkened told me he hated admitting I had a point. His silence stretched taut and tense before he finally ground out. Celeste has been different lately, erratic, I can't deny it. For a brief moment, he seemed almost lost, almost human. Then his gaze shifted, searching mine. Maybe Ethan was right all along. I hurt you both. If I hadn't been caught between you two, If I'd done things differently, maybe you could have been good sisters." A bitter laugh tore out from me. "Don't flatter yourself, Kieran. You're not the tragic centerpiece of our story. Celeste and I weren't exactly painting each other's nails and borrowing each other's clothes before you came into the picture. I'd known a long time ago that Celeste and I weren't and would never be normal sisters. I'd made peace with it, no matter how much it stung. Even now, despite what she might think, I am not fighting with her over you. She wants you. I don't. Simple." He flinched, as though my words had struck deeper than intended. "Good. I've moved on, Kieran," I went on, softer but sharper. "I have a new life. And if you can accept that and stop meddling, maybe we can actually co-parent Daniel and give him some semblance of stability without tearing each other apart." The calm in my own voice startled me. Months ago, I never could have spoken to him this way. Steady, unwavering, not begging for scraps of his belief or affection. But now I could. He studied me, long and hard, as though searching for cracks in my armor, scraps of the Sarah he thought he'd known. Then his voice dropped low, and his question came out of nowhere. "Is Lucian really that great? Is he the reason you've changed?" The question made my lips twitch despite myself. He sounded almost jealous. I let the smile spread, slow and deliberate, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Lucian wasn't the reason I'd changed, but the answer to his first question was easy. Yes, he's that great. And with that, I walked away, unflinching, letting my words hang heavy between us. Kieran's Pove. I stood, frozen, watching Sarah's retreating figure until the sway of her hair and the measured lift of her shoulders disappeared behind the arch of the park entrance. The ache in my chest wasn't a sharp stab. It was the slow, gnawing kind that crept in and hollowed everything out. It was pain, yes, but pain I couldn't quite qualify. The cruelest part was that it shouldn't have hurt. Not when she had made it clear again and again that there was no room for me in her world. And after that phone call the night I let myself have a little too much to drink, after Lucian's curt voice came down the line, practically telling me to fuck off and stop disrupting their time together, I realized there was no going back for us. If there had even been a back in the first place. Perhaps that was what haunted me the most, the realization that Sarah and I had never truly had a past together, not one worth holding on to, at least. From the very beginning of our so-called marriage, I had never really seen her. I had looked through her, past her, around her, as though she were nothing more than an inconvenient shadow, the ghost of my mistakes. My hatred, born of my own blindness, my own misplaced affections, had been the lens through which I saw everything she did. And through that warped lens, she had always come out small, invisible. I let myself believe that lie because it was easier than admitting how much of me was bound up in someone I refused to acknowledge. If not for the attack at the funeral, the blood, the screaming, the bone-deep terror of almost losing her, I would have gone on this way indefinitely, ignoring her, overlooking her, pretending she was nothing more than the silent, unremarkable mother of my child, tethered to my life by duty alone. And so I asked myself, staring at the empty space where she had stood moments before, what exactly was I losing now? What was I mourning? Could I even call the cause of this ache in my chest love? Did I have the right to use such a word after all the ways I'd fucked up? The echo of Daniel's laughter floated faintly in my mind, and I felt myself drawn back to the bench. This was his spot, the one he always claimed when we came here, and as I lowered myself onto it, gripping the wooden slats, a memory bloomed vividly in my mind. He must have been about 7 years old, too young to ask introspective questions. Yet he'd scrambled up beside me and fixed his wide, innocent eyes on me as he asked, "Daddy, what is love?" At the time, my thoughts had gone straight to Celeste. Surely our relationship was proof enough. After all, wasn't that what everyone said? That Celeste and I were love's perfect example? But even in that moment, something in me held back. Something in me knew better, so I had told him instead about my parents, two fated wolves who had overcome all odds and chosen each other and stayed by each other's side until the end. Their steadiness, their loyalty, the awe with which my father looked at my mother, even after decades together. The way he worshipped the ground she walked on and would burn the world down for her. That, I'd told Daniel, was love. It was what I thought I was missing, what I thought Sarah had taken from me. But now, with Celeste back in my life, I found myself questioning everything, the love I thought I had with her. It wasn't what I had imagined. Yes, once upon a time, we had been the golden couple, the alpha heir and the Lockwood princess. Together we had been envied, admired, praised. Dating Celeste had satisfied every ounce of ego in me. She was grace and beauty, and she sparked a fire in me. We'd been young and wild once, stolen nights, burning kisses that promised more but never crossed the final line. Edward Lockwood had made it very clear he wouldn't tolerate his daughter ending up pregnant before marriage, especially not as a minor. I had respected that, or at least abided by it, believing that our fairy tale ending was only a matter of time. The golden couple's coronation. I had thought Celeste and I were destined, that nothing could sever what we had. But then that night, that fateful night, came and everything veered off course. In hindsight, I'm surprised Edward didn't sink his claws into my heart afterward. After all, it might have been with the wrong daughter, but I'd broken his rules, nonetheless. Anyways, when Celeste returned to me, I expected we would fall back into each other with desperate hunger, feverishly making up for the years we'd lost. I thought the first chance we got, I would pull her into my arms and never let her go again. Yet, the truth was damning. I found myself avoiding her. Every time we got close, my body reacted with instinctive hesitation, and I didn't understand why until I saw Lucien and Sarah together. The way he looked at her, the way her laughter softened in his presence, it enraged me, and that rage cracked something open inside me. I realized then that I did care for Celeste, but not in the way I had convinced myself. The fierce possessiveness that clawed through me at the sight of Sarah with another man was something I had never once felt with Celeste. It was primal, raw, uncontrollable. Everyone around me had told me I loved Celeste, and I had echoed the words back so many times I had nearly believed them. But now my heart recoiled from the script I had been reading my entire life. Resistance, sharp and undeniable, pressed in with every thought of returning to what I once thought I wanted. And it only got worse. With every touch, every kiss I shared with Celeste, the more I felt myself retreating from her and leaning towards. With a heavy sigh, I rose from the bench. The weight of the memories crowding in was too heavy, suffocating. But it seemed I wasn't through walking down memory lane. My steps led me toward the library by the park, almost by instinct. It was here, only days ago, that I had spoken with the old scholar who lived here, a man whose mind was a treasure chest of lore, half-forgotten traditions, and truths buried beneath centuries of repetition. I had asked him a question I never thought I would. Was there a way, beyond scent and wolf recognition, to truly identify one's mate? A way to cut through doubt, to pierce the fog of uncertainty that plagued me? The scholar's eyes had twinkled knowingly, as if he saw deeper into me than I intended him to. He told me there was. The most direct and effective way was through the mating mark itself. If the person is truly your fated mate, he had said, then marking them, whether or not you possess wolves, whether or not your senses confirmed it, would awaken the bond, would bind your souls together with undeniable clarity. Even if all else is muted, the mark will not lie. It should have been Celeste I thought of in that moment. By all logic, by every expectation laid on my shoulders, it should have been her. But the instant the words left his lips, my mind betrayed me. I thought of Sarah. I thought of her neck beneath my lips, of the delicate curve where her pulse thundered, and the question tore through me like a blade. What would have happened if I had marked her back then at the blood hunt, or the night I kissed her on her front porch, or on the yacht, or in the villa? Would the truth have awakened between us? Would I have seen her differently, known her differently? Would all this pain, this tangled mess, have been avoided? I remembered standing there, bracing my hands against the scholar's desk, feeling the weight of that possibility pressing down on me. My entire life reframed by a single choice I had never made. Before I could follow that dangerous train of thought further and get consumed by regrets and what-ifs, Gavin's voice ripped through my mind, urgent and sharp. "Alpha, we've caught him. The mastermind behind Saraphina's kidnapping. He's in custody." My heart lurched, thundering in my chest. For a moment, the shadows of the library receded from my mind, and all I could hear was the echo of those words. The mastermind, the one who had dared to touch her, the one who had tried to take her from me. The hollow ache of loss twisted into something else, something hotter, sharper, alive with purpose. For the first time that evening, I felt clarity burning through the haze. And with it came relief. Because if I didn't find something else to focus on, I would lose my fucking mind. Kieran's Po V. The Nightfang dungeon was not meant for comfort. Stone walls sweated dampness, the air thick with mildew, and the metallic tang of blood. Every sound, the drip of water, the clank of chains, the scuff of boots on stone, echoed with an ominous life of its own. The torches cast long, quivering shadows across the walls, turning the narrow passage into something that felt alive. I'd walked this corridor 100 times before, and tonight, Gavin's words still rang in my ears. We've caught the mastermind. He's in custody. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. A nameless rogue? Some faceless scavenger who'd finally overreached? What I did not expect was the man who sat shackled in the interrogation chamber. Jack Draven. I froze at the threshold, disbelief momentarily rooting me to the ground. Impossible, I muttered, my voice dropping to a growl. But it was him. His shaggy hair was longer, streaked with grime, but those eyes, icy gray, sharp with mockery, were unmistakable. His smirk stretched wider when he saw me, like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. Alpha Kieran, Jack drawled, leaning backwards lazily in his chair, despite the iron cuffs biting into his wrists. What a warm welcome. You look surprised. Didn't think you'd see me again? Gavin. I didn't take my eyes off Jack. What the fuck? Gavin shifted uneasily beside me. My sentiments exactly, but we verified his identity. It's him. I clenched my fists at my sides. Memories flooded back, harsh and unrelenting. Jack had once been the son of Alpha Marcus Draven of the Silverpine Pack, a promising heir with too much arrogance for his own good, until he had violated one of our oldest, most sacred common laws. No wolf shall spill innocent human blood without just cause. The law wasn't ceremonial. It existed to preserve the fragile balance between our kind and humans, to keep suspicion and blood hunts from igniting. Jack had slaughtered 2 human campers in cold blood, teenagers who had stumbled into Silverpine territory by mistake. No provocation, no defense, just carnage. I'd been the one to hunt him down and drag him back to his pack's border. I still remembered the night clearly, the way he'd sneered even with my claws at his throat, as though nothing could touch him. Alpha Marcus had begged me for leniency, but Edward had stood firm at my side. A violation like that could not be forgiven. Jack was stripped of his title, banished, and his name was scorched from the registries. And now here he was, years later, the one behind Sarah's abduction. My blood surged hot in my veins. I stepped inside, the heavy door groaning shut behind me. Why? My voice came out low, dangerous. Why her? Jack tilted his head, as though savoring the tension in the room. Straight to the point, eh? I was hoping for a little small talk. How's the family, Alpha? Oh, wait. His grin widened. That's what this is about, isn't it? Your precious ex-wife. The word ex-wife struck like a blade. I ignored the sting, stepping closer until the torchlight carved harsh lines across Jack's face. Answer. Me. He chuckled, the grating sound echoing off the stone walls. Quite frankly, I don't understand why you care, and honestly, why not? She's weak, wolfless, convenient, and besides, his eyes glittered. Weren't we doing you a favor? You never wanted her anyway. You made that clear enough to the entire fucking world. The mocking lilt in his tones sliced deeper than claws. My hands twitched at my sides, but I forced myself still. She's nothing to you, right? Jack leaned forward, chains rattling as they held him back. So why the outrage? Shouldn't you be thanking me? I took the burden off your hands. He chuckled, an ugly rasping sound that pulled at the last threads of my control. If anything, you owe me. I helped you with your pest problem. Something inside me snapped. I lunged, my hand clamping around his throat, slamming him back against the chair so hard it scraped against the stone floor. His smirk faltered only slightly, but his pulse thundered beneath my grip, betraying his panic. Speak her name again with that filthy mouth, I snarled, Ashar surging dangerously close to the surface, and I'll rip out your tongue and choke you with it. Jack choked a laugh, even as his face reddened under the pressure. Uh-oh, he rasped. It would seem like I've struck a nerve. His grin split wider, feral. Is it possible, Alpha Kieran, that that little nobody could actually be your weakness? I blanched and quickly struggled to regain my composure, but that brief moment of weakness was enough for Jack to choke out another laugh. Interesting. I'll make sure to let the others know. Next time, Alpha, it won't just be a kidnapping, we'll carve our message into her skin. I bet she has the most delicious screams. My vision blurred red. Rage howled in my ears. Without thinking, I smashed Jack to the ground, the chair splintering under the force. My fist slammed into his jaw, his ribs, every blow fueled by the image of Sarah's face twisted in terror. The bruises around her wrist, the gash on her forehead. Chains clattered as Jack crumpled under me, coughing blood, yet he kept laughing, broken and wheezing. "You're proving me right," he spat between blows. "Look at you, the fearsome alpha of Nightfang, losing control because of a weak, wolfless outcast." My claws unsheathed, pressing against his throat. A single push and his blood would flood the stones. "Say one more word," I hissed, "and you won't live to regret it." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Brief, but there. His lip trembled as he pressed them shut. I shoved his head against the concrete as I stood, breath ragged, and barked to the guards, "Throw him in the water cell." 2 sentinels hauled him up, half dragging his battered frame across the floor. "You can't do this," Jack shouted hoarsely, struggling weakly against their grip. "She doesn't belong to any pack. She doesn't fall under your laws. She's fair fucking game. You have no authority over me when it comes to her." I stalked forward, each step deliberate and menacing. "I don't need authority," I growled. "I am authority, and if you so much as breathe Sarah's name again, I'll tear your throat out myself and mail your severed head to your father." The guards shoved him into the darkness of the water cell, the sound of sloshing and iron slamming shut ringing through the hall. His curses echoed faintly, swallowed by stone and water. Only when silence returned did I realize how hard my hands were shaking, how heavy I was breathing. "Alpha," Gavin said carefully, his voice breaking the tension. "Keeping him here in secret, it's dangerous." "You would have me set him free?" I growled, my voice low and gravelly. Gavin flinched, but held his ground, speaking calmly. "All I'm saying is that his father still values him. If Marcus learns we've taken Jack, it could stir conflict between Nightfang and Silverpine." I turned on him, my chest heaving. "Then let it. Alphas like Marcus are the reason rogues have swelled in power. They shelter their disgraced sons and relatives, feed them resources, treat them like pawns in their petty schemes to topple rivals. I gestured toward the cell. "This is what happens when rot is left unchecked." It was one of the many reasons I respected Edward Lockwood. He and I recognized that rogues were not simply enemies of the pack. They were threats to the balance of the entire werewolf realm. Gavin hesitated. "Still, Marcus will demand his son's return, and if word spreads, the other packs might take sides." "Suppress it," I cut in. "No one outside this room needs to know Jack's in custody. Not yet." He studied me, cautious but loyal. "As you command." I dragged a hand over my face, exhaling hard. My rage still simmered, hot and raw, but beneath it churned confusion I couldn't shake. "Why Sarah?" Jack's words replayed in my head, each one a needle stuck in my brain. "She's weak, wolfless, convenient." It made no sense. If the rogues wanted leverage against Edward, why not target Ethan? If I were their endgame, why not target Daniel? They were the heirs, the symbol of our pack's futures. Striking them would have sent a clearer, deadlier message. But Sarah? She had no wolf, no status. She barely belonged in Frostbane, and since our divorce, she didn't belong in Nightfang either. For years, I myself had dismissed her as nothing more than a shadow on the edge of my life. So why had they seen her as valuable enough to take? I sank back against the cold wall, my jaw tight. "She's not worthless," Gavin said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm. My head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What are you saying?" He met my gaze evenly. "If it were her connection to Edward or you, there are more valuable targets than her. I think we've underestimated her worth. If the rogues are targeting her, they see something we don't, something we've refused to see." The words landed heavy, sharper than he knew. Underestimated. That was a phenomenon I was becoming achingly familiar with. I'd seen Sarah as nothing more than an obligation I needed to fulfill. I'd underestimated what she meant to me. I wanted to deny it, to shove it away like I had for years. But the memory of Jack's laughter, the way he had taunted me for my reaction, still clawed at my chest. Sarah, my weakness. And for the first time I realized how true it was. Saraphina's POV. 2 days had passed since my last conversation with Kieran. 2 days since my preternatural encounter in the forest. 2 days since the storm inside me had ebbed, leaving me raw and hollow, adrift between the crushing silence where my wolf should have been and hope that one day that hollow would fill. At first, I wanted nothing more than to shut the world out, to curl up in my room and let the ache swallow me whole, to drown in my sorrow, convincing myself I had been a fool to believe, even for a heartbeat, that I could belong in a world that had spent so long pretending I didn't exist. But that spiral, that weakness pulling me toward despair, wasn't why I had come here. I remembered the old woman's words, how pain blinded more than darkness, how patience would draw strength where doubt only smothered it. I had made a vow when I joined the OTS. I wasn't here for Kieran, not even for Lucian. I came for Daniel, and for myself. That memory, like a spark fanned to flame, burned through the fog of dejection, reminding me that strength was never born in a single moment. It was in choosing, again and again, not to give up. Strength wasn't a straight line. It was bruises, failures, moments of humiliation, and standing up again anyway. That night, as I sat cross-legged on my bed with my phone balanced on my knees and the screen illuminated Daniel's bright, eager face, my resolve strengthened. His grin stretched wide, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom. His voice was bubbling with energy, the way it always did when he couldn't wait to share something with me. You won't believe what Grandpa started teaching me today. I laughed softly at his enthusiasm, adjusting the angle of the camera so he could see me better. Oh, what's got you so worked up? He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes glowing with the kind of joy that only sparkled in the innocent eyes of children. Werewolf history. Grandpa said I'm old enough now to start learning about the legends. And, Mom... His voice dropped into a conspiratorial whisper, though his excitement still shone through. He told me the story of the lone wolf. Alcanor? I blinked, sitting up straighter. Alcanor? I had heard scraps of Alcanor's story before, half-whispered fragments that never formed the whole. So when we were children, when Celeste was still very little and I still had a voice in my family, Ethan and I used to bicker endlessly over whether Alcanor was a man or a woman. Our mother had overheard once, and in her usual clipped way, told us not to waste time on just a legend. But I remember the way her eyes lingered on me afterward, the faintest curve of her mouth when I held my ground. And then she added, but only a woman could have withstood such trials and still prevailed. And that quiet acknowledgement, subtle as it was, had been rare enough to burn itself into memory. And maybe that's why the name Alcanor always stayed with me, long after the argument ended. Daniel nodded vigorously, his curly hair bouncing. Yeah, he was incredible, Mom. Stronger than whole packs put together. He fought not just with claws, but with this kind of righteousness. Grandpa said nobody even knows if he was really a man or a woman. Some people think he wasn't either, just that he wandered alone, without a pack, but wherever he went, he brought peace. He protected both wolves and humans when they were at risk. And guess what? His voice trembled with awe. Grandpa said I could be like him someday. The screen blurred as tears pricked my eyes, unbidden. Daniel's little face, so earnest, so certain, it was everything I had ever dreamed of for him. A future unchained from the shadows of my weakness, filled instead with light and purpose. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Did your grandpa really say that? Yes. Daniel's chest puffed with pride. He said if I keep learning and if I work hard, by the time I'm 10, I might even start training with the pack. Isn't that amazing? I smiled, though my fingers tightened on the edge of my phone. That is amazing. I'm so proud of you, my love. A pang went through me. Pride and fear tangled in equal measure. My boy was growing so quickly, stepping into a destiny that carried weight beyond his years, and I'd known it since he was very little. Daniel was clever, strong, he held an innate power that even I could sense. I knew without a doubt that fate had great plans for my son, and insecurity clawed its way up my throat before I could stop it. Daniel, my voice softened. Would you be disappointed in me if I never got my wolf? His grin faltered. His little brows furrowed the way Kieran's did when he was deep in thought. Disappointed? Why would I be? I drop my gaze, ashamed of my own weakness, because I'm not like other wolves. Because no matter how hard I train, I'll always be missing a piece of myself. And if I'm missing it, maybe you'll be missing something too. The silence stretched, heavy, until Daniel's voice cut through, firm, steady, far older than his years. Mom, no. I looked back at the screen, startled. His eyes burned with conviction. I mean, yeah, I admire Alcanor. He's like, wow, a real hero, right? But do you know what made him special? What made him special was that he didn't give up. Even when he didn't have a pack, even when everyone thought he was nothing, he proved them wrong. His little hand came up, pressing to his chest. You always tell me that heroes aren't the strongest ones, they're the ones who refuse to quit. And Mom? His voice cracked with emotion. That's you. You're already my hero. My breath caught. The screen shimmered as tears spilled freely down my cheeks, but I didn't bother wiping them away. My son, my Daniel, he was so much stronger, wiser than I had ever been at his age. I forced a smile through the sob lodged in my throat. Oh, my sweet boy. Don't cry, Mom. He scrambled, panicked by my tears. I didn't mean to make you sad. I'm not sad, I interrupted gently, shaking my head. These are happy tears. You don't know how much your words mean to me. Daniel relaxed, giving me a sheepish grin. Well, good, because it's true. You're the one teaching me what it means to never give up. You're already stronger than most wolves, even if they don't see it. I touched the screen, as though I could reach through and hold his face. I love you, Daniel, more than anything in this world. I love you too, Mom, he said without hesitation. When the call ended, I sat for a long moment in silence, the tears drying on my cheeks. Daniel's words lingered, wrapping around me like armor. You're already my hero. I realized then that I had let one man's rejection, one pack's scorn, define me for far too long. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't weak. And I would not let anyone, rogues, power, even my own self-doubt, steal from me the truth that my son had already seen. By the next morning, the fire in me had reignited. When I stepped back onto the sparring mats with Maya, I wasn't the same Sarah who had hesitated, who had pulled her punches for fear of being inadequate. Maya circled me, her smirk sharp, eyes glittering with challenge. Come on, Sarah. You're still moving like you're afraid to break something. You want to survive the trial? You want to stand up to Jessica? You'll need more than careful footwork. Her words stung, but I knew she wasn't wrong. My stance was tight, cautious, as though every shift in balance might send me crashing down. Sweat dampened my hairline, trickling into my eyes. We were in the arena today, and the cold walls echoed with the scuff of our boots and the dull thud of bodies sparring in the nearby mats. Loosen up, Maya barked, darting in with a quick feint toward my ribs. I flinched, raising my guard too high, and she chuckled under her breath. Predictable. Heat flared in my cheeks. Gods, she was annoying as my trainer. I pivoted on my heel, trying to anticipate her next strike, but she was faster, always faster. She ducked low, sweeping at my legs. I stumbled back, barely catching my balance before she pressed forward again, jabbing lightly at my shoulder. Not enough to hurt, but enough to humiliate. Gods, I wished we were training in private. What did I say about silencing that voice, Sarah? You're thinking too much, she taunted, her movements light, predatory. Every step, every swing, you hesitate? You gonna hesitate when someone's trying to tear your throat out? My chest heaved as I adjusted my footing, anger pushing at the edges of my restraint. She wanted me to snap, I realized. She wanted me to stop holding back. Maya lunged again, this time aiming for my midsection. Instinct overrode doubt. I twisted sideways, her strike grazing past me, and brought my arm up in a block that jarred my entire shoulder. My breath caught, but for the first time, I hadn't flinched. Better, she muttered, circling again. Her grin widened, feral and approving. But not enough. Something in me shifted. I stopped hearing the shuffle of others training, stopped caring about whether I looked clumsy or too slow. All that existed was Maya, the rhythm of her feet, the fire in her eyes daring me to rise higher. I gritted my teeth, stepped in hard, and for once I didn't second-guess the motion. My fist drove forward, cutting through the space between us and connecting squarely with her jaw. A solid thud reverberated through my knuckles, sharp and satisfying, like striking through stone that had long blocked my path. Maya staggered back, eyes wide with shock. For a heartbeat, I froze, horrified. Shit, Maya, I didn't mean. But then she laughed. A full, throaty laugh that I'm sure everyone in the arena heard. Well, well, she said, rubbing her jaw with a grin. Well, that's what I'm fucking talking about. Heat flared in my cheeks, but pride curled in my chest. She hopped giddily and pulled me into a hug, instantly switching to best friend mode. Yes, babe, yes. She pulled away, holding me at arm's length. If you keep this up, Sarah, you're going to crush the trial and Jessica's stupid face. What have I been telling you? You've got more in you than you realize. Her words struck a chord, not unlike Daniel's, and the more I heard them, the more I believed them. Lucian's Pove. I'd never been one for peace and quiet. The clang of bodies hitting mats, the hiss of breath, the sharp bark of instructors ringing above the din, that was my happy place. I lingered at the edge of the arena, half distracted by the countless emails and reports I had to sort through, half attuned to the rhythms of the OTS. Normally, nothing here surprised me. I had built this place from nothing, watched countless wolves arrive broken and claw their way toward something sharper. But when Maya strode toward me, her grin practically splitting her face, I knew something unusual had happened. Maya never smiled during training. Smirks, maybe. Smug little twists of her lips when she dismantled an opponent. But this was different. You won't believe what just happened. Her dark eyes gleamed, sweat glistening on her caramel skin. I arched a brow. Uh-oh, if you killed someone, I don't want to hear it. Plausible deniability. She rolled her eyes. Trust me, you want to hear this. Sarah landed a clean hit. On me. For a heartbeat, I thought I misheard. On you? Maya was the strongest beta female I'd ever trained, perhaps the strongest I'd ever seen anywhere. I'd watched her reduce males, alphas and betas alike, to quivering wrecks. Her speed and instincts honed like a blade forged in fire. There were very few warriors I knew who could match Maya Cartridge at full strength. Yes, she rubbed her jaw proudly. Square hit. She didn't hold back this time. Surprised the hell out of me. I'm going to bruise, she declared happily. I glanced instinctively toward the mats, where Sarah stood off to the side, clutching a water bottle. She looked flushed, sweat plastering strands of hair to her temples, her chest rising and falling in quick, unsteady breaths. Her eyes lifted just then, catching mine, and she quickly looked away, as though uncertain she deserved any recognition. Maya leaned closer. Don't let her fool you with that humble act. She tried to tell me it only happened because I was distracted. Maya let out a sharp laugh. I've never once lost focus in training, and she knows it. That strike was hers, fair and square. I swallowed down a flicker of astonishment. It wasn't the strike itself that caught me off guard. It was what it meant. I'd seen too many wolves stagnate, too many buckle under the weight of their missing halves, resigned to mediocrity. But Sarah, she was clawing her way upward. Interesting, I murmured, my gaze remaining fixed on Sarah. Interesting? Maya barked out a laugh. That woman's going to eat Jessica alive if she keeps this up, and about damn time, too. She punched my arm lightly, her grin feral. You were right to bring her here, Lucian. She's one of us now. So I didn't answer, not aloud, but the thought circled in me like a hawk. One of us? She might very well surpass even that. Sarah didn't object when I walked up to her after training and asked her out to dinner. The restaurant around us glowed with low amber lights, crystal glasses catching flickers of candlelight. Soft music drifted from the corner, barely louder than the muted hum of conversation from other tables. But for me, the world narrowed to the woman sitting across from me. Sarah. Her posture was different tonight, less guarded than usual. She ate slowly, calmly, but with an ease I'd seen flicker once or twice since she first arrived at OTS. But now it settled around her like it had always been there, and she looked steady, centered. When her gaze lifted and brushed mine, I saw it, the glow of something I had feared she might never find. Confidence. I waited until the server cleared our plates and replaced them with dessert. The nearby tables emptied, leaving only the soft clatter of cutlery in the distance. A bottle of wine sweated between us, the scent of roasted garlic and herbs still lingering in the air. You've changed, I said, studying her carefully. Her fork paused midway to her lips. Changed? Yes. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. You carry yourself differently. Training doesn't seem to weigh on you the way it did before. She set the fork down, tracing the rim of her glass with one finger. For a long moment, I thought she might deflect, but then she smiled, a small, wry thing, as though the act itself surprised her. "I suppose I have," she admitted softly. "I spent so long mourning what I didn't have, what I thought I was losing, that I forgot what I still had, or what I could still build." There was something in her tone that pulled me closer, though I hadn't moved an inch. "And what reminded you?" She hesitated, as if debating whether to bear the truth. Then she sighed and lifted her gaze to mine. "Ironically, my past. I've carried it around like chains for so long. Every memory of rejection, of being overlooked, of everyone choosing Celeste, it used to feel like a weight I could never crawl out from under, and that was all I focused on. But when I thought of Daniel and how he sees me..." Her lips curved upward again, faint but unshaken. For the first time, I could look back and not feel crushed. I could smile. Those days don't own me anymore. I've grown past it. Something twisted in my chest. Admiration, yes, but also a pang of sympathy so sharp it almost made me wince. I wanted to reach across the linen-covered table to tell her she had every right to still ache, that strength didn't mean erasing scars. But before I could speak, she cut me off, her eyes bright with fierce resolve. "Don't misunderstand, Lucian. I'm not telling you this because I want your pity. I'm telling you because I need you to know. I clawed my way out. That history can't bury me anymore. I've built my own armor, and now I believe I can achieve anything I want." Her voice carried not arrogance, but certainty, the kind forged in fire, tempered by pain. I reached across the table anyway, closing my hand around hers. "You're right," I said quietly. "You can. More than you even realize. I knew it from the moment I met you, Sarah. You embody what OTS was built for, wolves who refuse to be defined by what they lack, wolves who carve out their worth with their own hands. You are exactly the kind of wolf the moon goddess meant to bless. Whether you shift or not, your value is undeniable." Her lips parted slightly, as though my words startled her. "And now," I continued, my grip tightening just enough for emphasis, "we're going to make sure everyone, at the LST, in every pack, sees that truth. No one will ever mistake you for weak again." Her eyes shone, a mixture of gratitude and determination, and in that moment, I wasn't just looking at a survivor. I was looking at a woman who had the potential to be more than even she imagined. Sarah had the heart of a Luna, not the ornamental kind, draped on an alpha's arm for show. No, she was the kind of Luna who inspired, who rose from ruin and made others believe they could too. The kind of Luna who would stand shoulder to shoulder with her alpha and command respect in her own right. My perfect Luna. Her hand was still in mine when her smile widened, free, unguarded. And I thought, not for the first time, that if fate had been kinder, if I had met her under different stars, perhaps I would not only admire and respect her, perhaps I would truly love her. Maybe the way I had loved, but I kept that thought locked away, deep in my chest. For now it was enough to see her rise, enough to stand at her side and ensure the world learned what I already knew. Saraphina Blackthorn was no longer a shadow. She was becoming an unstoppable force. Seraphina's Pove. Resolve was a strange thing. It didn't always arrive like a thunderclap or a war cry. Sometimes it slipped in quietly, like a tide I hadn't noticed until it carried me farther than I expected. After my dinner with Lucian, that tide hadn't receded. It stayed with me, washing away the last clinging doubts I had about my place here. His words, "You are exactly the kind of wolf the moon goddess meant to bless," still echoed in my head. I wasn't naive enough to let praise turn me reckless, but it had steadied me. I wasn't here just to grow stronger for myself anymore. I was here for all of us, every wolf who had ever been told they were half-formed, unworthy, invisible. Wolves like me. Wolves who had forgotten what it felt like to hold their heads high. And there wasn't much time left. Barely 2 weeks stood between us and the LST. It had been 10 years since OTS first opened its gates, and according to Maya, this anniversary's LST had drawn more wolves than in the history of OTS. Volunteering, along with many other students to help with preparations, was a no-brainer. That was how I got partnered with Judy Barnes, a pretty redhead Omega, who had apparently baked the cake for my surprise birthday party. We ended up at the reception desk of the Grand Crest Hotel, arms full of ledgers, guest lists, and room keys, trying to corral the chaos that descended with every new arrival. The lobby buzzed with sound, laughter, barking orders, the shuffle of boots on polished marble. Wolves poured in from every direction, representing packs from the south, which was Judy's and my jurisdiction. Some radiated sharp dominance, others carried the mellow air of travelers come to observe rather than compete. "Okay," Judy muttered beside me, flipping through a ledger while her auburn braids slid over her shoulder. "Next up, Cypress Vale Pack, 12 members." I glanced toward the doors. Sure enough, a group strode in, led by a tall man with raven hair streaked with silver. His smile was easy, his eyes bright with the kind of warmth that made me think of fall. "Welcome to the Grand Crest Hotel," I said, inclining my head with a warm smile. "I'm Sarah, and this is Judy. We'll be assisting with your stay." "Alpha Thomas? Cypress Vale," he introduced smoothly, his voice carrying the timbre of someone who was used to being listened to but not obsessed with being obeyed. "Thank you for hosting us." Behind him, his wolves, obviously strong but refreshingly unpretentious, bowed their heads politely. They smelled faintly of pine resin and fresh earth. They were followed by the Seabreeze Pack, who arrived in a flurry of chatter and bright clothing, the kind of people who wore smiles like jewelry. Their Luna, a petite woman with hair dyed sea green, winked at me as if we were old friends. Then came the Granite Fang Pack, whose Alpha barely spoke at all. He was broad, stone-faced, and his wolves carried themselves with a military precision that made my back straighten automatically. Each pack had its flavor, its weight, and Judy and I worked like cogs in a machine, assigning rooms, fielding questions, smoothing over little disputes. The hours blurred, the stack of check-in forms dwindling and replenishing like a tide. It was exhausting, but it was also invigorating. Every time I lifted my gaze, I caught sight of faces that didn't know me, didn't know my past, and yet here I was, standing as their first point of contact. Not as the ostracized Lockwood daughter or the invisible Blackthorn wife. Here I was just Sarah of OTS. That peace and exhilaration carried me until the doors slammed open with a force that rattled the crystal chandeliers. The Shadowclaw wolves swept in like a storm front. At their head was Brinjar. I didn't need the whispered comments behind me or the guest profile document to know his name. His presence announced it loud enough. Thick shoulders, blonde hair cropped close to his scalp, and eyes the color of burnt copper. He walked with the swagger of someone who had never heard the word no in his life. "Reception," he barked before even reaching the desk. "We need our rooms. Now." Judy and I exchanged a quick glance. She squared her shoulders, but I could see the flicker of unease in her eyes. Shadowclaw's reputation preceded them. They were infamous for their aggression and for looking down on anyone they considered weak. I pulled the ledger closer, flipping to their entry. Shadowclaw Pack, Beta Brinjar leading. 5 competitors, 6 attendants. Yes, he interrupted, drumming his fingers on the marble counter. "Give us the Alpha Wing." I looked up. "That won't be possible," I answered evenly. "The Alpha Wing is strictly reserved for alphas," I emphasized, since his big head came with a lacking sense of self. "Your assigned rooms are here." I slid the keys toward him. He didn't take them. Instead, his lips curled in a mocking smile. "Those rooms reek." My brow furrowed. "Reek? Like an Omega's den," he sneered. His voice carried easily, drawing the attention of other guests in the lobby. "Do you expect Shadowclaw to debase ourselves in a place like that? We deserve the Alpha Wing." Judy stiffened at the insult, and heat licked at the back of my neck, but I kept my expression even. "All packs are bound by the same rules, Brinjar. The Alpha Wing is for alphas, lunas, and their direct mates. No exceptions." He leaned closer, his breath sharp with the tang of meat. Funny, a place that trains pathetic outcasts without wolves now presumes to lecture us on rules. "Tell me, do you truly think weaklings like you can dictate terms to Shadowclaw?" The words hit their mark. I felt the eyes on me, felt the old sting of dismissal rise like a phantom bruise. For a heartbeat, the urge to shrink back warred with the vow I'd made to myself. But then I remembered what I said to Lucien. I've built my own armor. I picked up the keys from the counter, shoved them squarely at Brinjar's chest, and met his eyes without flinching. "If Shadowclaw warriors lack the basic discipline to stay in the rooms assigned to them," I said, my voice clear enough to carry through the lobby, "then that's your shame. Because strength that crumbles at the smell of an Omega isn't strength at all. It's insecurity." Tell me, Brinjar, are you insecure? A ripple went through the watching crowd. Brinjar's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the keys. For a moment, I thought he might throw them back at me. But the silence stretching around him was worse than any weapon. Every gaze pinned him, waiting to see what he would do. And under that weight, his swagger faltered. He shoved the keys into his pocket and muttered something under his breath before jerking his head toward his pack. They slunk off toward the elevators, stiff-backed but silent. As soon as his broad shoulders disappeared, Judy let out a low whistle. She angled her ledger to shield her hand and gave me a covert thumbs up. "Nice," she mouthed. I allowed myself the faintest smile, then turned to greet the next pack as though nothing had happened. The line of guests began moving again, chatter resuming like a stream after a boulder had been pulled from its path. It wasn't until later, during our short break, that someone approached me. "Hey," a voice said, warm and slightly roughened at the edges. I turned to find a man leaning casually against one of the pillars. His hair was a shade between brown and ash, and his eyes, sharp, curious, watched me with interest. His build was lean, more wiry than bulky, but the easy way he carried himself told me he knew how to use every inch of it. "I saw what you did back there," he continued. "Nice handling. Most people just cave to Shadowclaw to keep the peace." "Yeah, I have experience caving to bullies," I replied cautiously. "Never again." His grin widened. "I'm Leo, Moss Stone Pack." I recognized his pack. They were based in the neutral land and were active members of OTS. "And trust me," he continued, "we deal with crap like that all the time. Those guys act like the world revolves around them." I found myself relaxing. "Sarah," I said, offering my hand. His grip was firm but not overbearing. "Figured. Word gets around. Does it now?" I arched a brow. "Sure. New faces, wolves without wolves, stirring things up at OTS? People notice." He shrugged. "Anyway, if you want some tips for speeding up check-ins, I've got a few. No sense letting jerks like Brinjar waste your time." He rattled off a handful of suggestions: streamlining paperwork, arranging keys in advance for bigger packs, ways to politely but firmly redirect complaints. Practical, simple things, but delivered with the confidence of someone who'd clearly done this before. I found myself smiling despite the ache in my feet and the knot forming in my shoulders. "Thanks, that'll help." "No problem. And if you need backup when Shadowclaw comes sniffing again, I'll be around. I'm assisting with logistics." He winked, then pushed off the pillar and melted back into the crowd. By the time the day ended, I was drained to the bone. My feet throbbed, my throat was dry, and my hands smelled faintly of ink and polished wood from handling so many ledgers and keys. But as Judy and I finally collapsed into chairs at the edge of the lobby, I couldn't stop the swell of satisfaction inside me. I had faced the storm and not bent. I had stood before the watching eyes of dozens of pack refused to let someone else's arrogance define me. For once, I wasn't left hollow after a confrontation. I was full of purpose, of quiet pride, of the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The LST was still ahead, and gods knew what challenges would come with it. But I was ready, for myself, for Daniel, and for every wolf who had ever been told they were less Saraphina's pove. Dinner with Maya was the first true pause I'd had in days. Both of us too exhausted to go home and bother with cooking, we sat tucked into a corner booth of the OTS dining hall, where the scent of roasting lamb mingled with garlic and rosemary. A steady hum of voices filled the space, students, instructors, even a few of the early arrived guests spilling over from the hotel's luxury dining rooms. The table between us was scattered with dishes. Maya's plate piled high, mine half picked through. She had been just as swamped as I was, maybe more. But now, with both of us finally seated, there was something almost giddy about the release. "Please tell me I'm not the only one who wants to strangle half the guests," Maya said, stabbing her fork through a hunk of lamb and pointing it at me like a weapon. "Half," I raised an eyebrow. "You're being generous." Her laugh rang out unapologetically loud, drawing a couple of glances our way. "Okay, fine. 3/4, especially your friend Brinjar." "Don't you dare call him my friend," I muttered, swirling the remains of my stew. Just the memory of his sneer was enough to sour the food on my tongue. "Oh, he's a delight," Maya went on, her sarcasm sharp. "The way he puffed his chest out in the lobby earlier. I thought for a second he was about to crow. Did you see the look on his wolves' faces? Like they were both terrified and embarrassed. I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. People like him thrive on humiliating others. Instead, he just made himself look like a child denied candy. Maya leaned forward, her smirk widening. And you, standing there, cool as ice? Damn, Sarah, I've been waiting years for someone to knock Shadow Claw down a peg. Didn't think it would be you. Her words warmed me all the way to my toes. The sting of doubt had been my shadow for so long that victories, no matter how small, still felt surreal. It wasn't just for me, I admitted. Judy was there. She would have taken the hit if I hadn't said something. Yeah, Judy, Maya said, her tone softening. That girl's got more steel in her than people give her credit for. We ate in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the clink of cutlery and the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby table. But soon enough, Maya was off again, recounting her own war stories from the past few days. Do you know what one of the Seabreeze wolves asked me? She said, incredulous. Whether we could install tide pools in their suite for proper ambiance. Tide pools, Sarah, with fish. As if the hotel staff could just whip up an ocean on demand. I choked on my drink, laughing. Please tell me you said yes. I told them sure, as long as they didn't mind crabs crawling into bed with them at night. Maya grinned wickedly. The look on their faces, she snort-laughed. Oh, I wish I had a camera. I shook my head, amused. You're terrible. She tipped her head. Thank you. We slipped into a rhythm, swapping ridiculous requests, snickering at Brinjar's arrogance, venting about the endless stream of guests. But somewhere between the jokes, the conversation deepened. She leaned back, her expression sharpening. You know why the turnout's so huge this year, right? Because it's the anniversary? I guessed. That's part of it. She lowered her voice, though the noise around us made it unnecessary. But Lucian's got something planned. A prize. I frowned. A prize? He hasn't announced what, not even to me, but from what I've gathered, it's big, like game-changing big. He wants the OTS on the map in a way no one can ignore. The word stirred something in me. That's why the hotels are bursting at the seams. Exactly. Maya ticked points off on her fingers. Half the wolves here are curious observers, waiting to see if we sink or swim. 30% are already behind us. And the last 20? Her mouth twisted. Here to mock us, sabotage us, or just watch us fail. Her breakdown settled in my chest like a weight. Lucian had always spoken of building something that could stand against the old systems, but hearing the numbers laid out made me realize just how precarious his vision was. I set my fork down, appetite gone. He's betting everything on this. Yup, Maya sipped her drink. And if he doesn't deliver, they'll tear him apart. Her bluntness stung, but it was the truth. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling beams above us. Resolve prickled through me like fire through dry kindling. I couldn't let Lucian's work, his dream, be mocked into oblivion. Not after everything he'd done for me, not after he'd given me a place when I had none. I won't let that happen, I murmured. Maya tilted her head, studying me. Then her lips quirked into a soft smile. Yeah, neither will I. It was almost midnight when we finally pushed our chairs back. My muscles ached with exhaustion, but a steadier fire burned in me. I was ready to carry my share. We were just stepping into the cool night air outside the hall when my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. Apprehension prickled through me when I saw the caller ID. I answered immediately. Judy? Is everything? Her voice was high, cracking with panic. Sarah, please, I swear I didn't take anything. My stomach dropped, my exhaustion vanished. Slow down. What happened? Where are you? The hotel lobby, she sobbed. They're saying I stole from them. Brinjar's here. He won't. Her words tangled in a rush of fear. I didn't need to hear more. I'm coming. Maya's expression sharpened as I hung up. What happened? Shadow Claw, I bit out. They're accusing Judy of theft. Her curse split the night air. Of course they are. Come on. We didn't bother with a car. We ran, the night wind biting at our faces, our feet hammering the pavement all the way to the Grand Crest. The lobby was chaos when we arrived. Brinjar stood in the center like a conquering tyrant, his voice booming through the hall. Judy was backed against the reception desk, pale and trembling, eyes wide with fear and humiliation. Around them, guests and staff circled like vultures, whispering, gawking. It was like the blown-up version of what had happened at Celeste's party. "Confess, you little shit," Brinjar was saying, each word a threatening dart. "Admit you took them. Save yourself the shame of us dragging this out." "I didn't," Judy cried, her hands shaking. "I would never." "You think anyone believes in Omega?" His laughter was cruel. "Pathetic. Enough." My voice cracked across the lobby like a whip. Every head turned. I strode forward, Maya at my side, heat burning in my chest. "What's going on here?" Brinjar sneered. "Perfect timing. Your little friend here decided to help herself to Shadowclaw property. Jewelry, documents, things of value. Of course we caught her." "That's a lie," Judy gasped. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "I didn't touch anything." I stepped between them, planting myself like a wall. "You're accusing her without proof." He smirked. "Proof? She's the only one with access and who's pathetic enough to stoop that low. Plus, we found all the stolen items with her belongings. What do you say to that?" Fury clawed at my throat, but I forced my voice to stay even. "You can't accuse her like this without evidence." His lips pulled back in a smug snarl. "The security footage was corrupted. Convenient, isn't it?" My gut twisted. "Yeah," I gritted out. "Pretty damn convenient." My mind whirred, desperately looking for a solution. Then I caught a familiar face in the crowd. I didn't hesitate. "Leo!" The wiry moss-stone wolf broke off from the crowd, moving toward us with quick strides. His sharp eyes flicked between me, Judy, and Brinjar. "What can I do?" "Shadowclaw says the footage was corrupted," I said. "Any way you can help?" His lips quirked. "Actually, yes, I can." He slipped behind the concierge desk, fingers flying across the keyboard of the hotel's system. The silence stretched, broken only by Judy's ragged breaths and Bringer's heavy disdain. Finally, Leo leaned back, triumphant. "Found it. Someone tried to delete the files, but not well enough." He turned the monitor outward. "Here's your thief." I recognized the Shadowclaw wolves the screen showed, slipping into a corridor, passing items from one bag to another, deliberately planting them in Judy's workspace. Clear. Undeniable. A murmur rippled through the lobby. I turned back to Brinjar, my voice cold steel. "What do you have to say now?" A snarl slipped out of him as he turned to his packmates, who shrank under his glare. "Obviously," he said darkly. "I've been deceived. My packmates must have gone behind my back to—" "Oh, save it," I snapped. He clamped his mouth shut, taken aback by the bite in my tone. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you accused an innocent Omega for what? To scratch an itch? To prove a point? Do you think what we're doing here is a game?" His face darkened, copper eyes blazing. "Watch your tongue." "No." I stepped closer, forcing him back an inch. "You will apologize. Here. Now. To Judy, or I will make sure every alpha in this building sees that footage before sunrise." His eyes narrowed. "Do you think I give a fuck?" "And then I'll send a copy to your Luna," I added sharply. "I've heard she has low tolerance for juvenile bullshit." I'd heard stories of their Luna's ruthlessness, and they made Brinjar seem like a fluffy teddy bear. Obviously, I wasn't in a million years going to poke a sleeping beast, but the bluff was more than enough to get the job done. Gasps flared. The crowd pressed closer, waiting. Brinjar's jaw worked furiously. His pride warred with the undeniable evidence. At last, he spat the words out like poison. "Forgive me." Judy's chin lifted, her fear burned away by something fiercer. "I don't forgive you." Her voice rang clear, shocking even me. "You're a playground bully and a coward. The only reason I'm letting this go is respect for OTS. And for Sarah. But on the tournament grounds?" Her eyes blazed. "I won't hold back." The hush that followed was absolute. Brinjar blinked, thrown off balance. The idea that a lowly Omega would stand her ground left him speechless. Then his lips peeled back in a snarl. "Then I'll be waiting, and I'll crush you." Judy's scoff cut through his bluster. "You'd better have the ability to back that up." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked out, head held high. I turned to Maya. "Any chance you can stay back and do as a—" She nodded before I could even finish the request. "You got it, babe. I'll settle everything." I shot her a grateful smile and turned to Leo. "Thank you." He smiled. It was my immense pleasure. With that, I turned on my heel and followed Judy out. Behind us, the crowd erupted. Some in shock, some in admiration, some in barely contained glee at seeing Shadowclaw humbled twice in the same day. But me, I felt something else. Pride. Fierce, unshakable pride. For Judy. For OTS. For the quiet tide of change that had begun to roll in. whether wolves like Brinjar wanted it or not,